The coffee splashed in slow motion, brown liquid arcing through the air, paper scattering like autumn leaves, and in that single chaotic moment, Ethan Caldwell's carefully controlled world shattered. For 8 months, he'd kept his head down, his heart closed, his life reduced to deadlines and bedtime stories. But when he looked up and saw Clara Whitmore kneeling in the hallway, soaked and smiling, something impossible began to crack open inside his chest. This is the story of a collision that changed everything. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The city of Montreval woke the way it always did. Slowly, reluctantly, under a blanket of morning fog that rolled off the river and settled into the narrow streets like an uninvited guest. Church bells echoed from somewhere distant. Delivery trucks rumbled over cobblestones. And in apartment 4B of the old Riverside building on Archer Street, Ethan Caldwell was already awake, staring at his laptop screen with bloodshot eyes and hands that smelled like coffee and desperation. 3:47 a.m. That's when he'd finally finished the last illustration. A children's book cover for a client in Boston who'd changed the concept 3 times and still wasn't satisfied. Ethan had redrawn the main character's expression 4 different ways, adjusted the color palette twice, and somehow made a cheerful bunny look more aspirational without making it look corporate. He didn't even know what that meant anymore. But he'd done it, sent the files, collapsed into bed for exactly 2 hours before his alarm went off. Now it was 6:15 a.m. on a Thursday, and Lily was singing in the bathroom. Not actual words, just sounds. Happy, tuneless sounds that only a 6-year-old could produce at this ungodly hour. Ethan listened to her through the thin walls and felt the familiar weight settle onto his shoulders. Love and exhaustion, tangled together so tightly he couldn't separate them anymore. "Daddy!" Lily's voice rang out. "I can't find my purple socks." Ethan dragged himself off the couch, where he'd fallen asleep still wearing yesterday's jeans. His back ached, his neck cracked when he turned his head. 32 years old, and he felt like he was made of spare parts held together with duct tape and determination. "Check the basket by the radiator," he called back. "I already checked. Check again." He stumbled into the kitchen, nearly tripping over a pile of Lily's drawings scattered across the floor. Crayon masterpieces depicting unicorns, rainbows, and what appeared to be their neighbor Mrs. Chen as a superhero. Ethan smiled despite himself and started the coffee maker, listening to it gurgle and hiss like it was personally offended by the early hour. The apartment was small, smaller than small, compact, the landlord had called it, which was real estate code for you can touch 3 walls without moving. One bedroom that Lily had claimed with an army of stuffed animals. A living room that doubled as Ethan's studio, workspace, dining room, and occasionally his bedroom when he fell asleep at his desk. A kitchen the size of a closet. A bathroom where the shower head pointed in 3 different directions depending on water pressure. But it was theirs. For 8 months now, it had been theirs. 8 months since Ethan had packed everything they owned into his aging Honda and driven 12 hours from Philadelphia to Montreval with Lily asleep in the back seat, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. 8 months since he'd decided that a fresh start in a city where nobody knew them was exactly what they needed. 8 months of proving to himself that he could do this alone. Found them! Lily emerged from the bathroom wearing mismatched pajamas, 1 purple sock, and a triumphant expression. They were in the basket by the radiator. "Told you." "You're a wizard, Daddy." Ethan poured coffee into his travel mug, the one with the chip on the rim that he kept meaning to replace, and tried to calculate how much sleep he'd gotten in the past week. The math wasn't encouraging. "Breakfast," he muttered, opening the refrigerator. Inside, 1/2 gallon of milk, some questionable yogurt, 3 eggs, and a container of leftover pasta that had definitely seen better days. He grabbed the eggs and started scrambling them in a pan while Lily climbed onto her chair at the small kitchen table and began coloring in a book about ocean animals. "Mrs. Patterson says we're learning about the water cycle today," Lily announced, not looking up from her picture of a very purple octopus. "That's cool. She says water goes up into the sky and becomes clouds and then comes back down as rain." "That's exactly right. But where does it go after that?" Ethan flipped the eggs, his brain moving in slow motion. "It goes into the ground, or into rivers, then back up into the sky again. It's a cycle." "A forever circle?" "Yeah, sweetie, a forever circle." Lily considered this seriously, then added more purple to her octopus. I wish we could go swimming. Maybe this summer. You always say that? She wasn't wrong. Ethan divided the eggs onto 2 plates and set one in front of Lily, along with a fork and a napkin she would absolutely not use. He ate standing up, leaning against the counter, watching his daughter color and feeling that familiar ache in his chest, the one that showed up whenever he thought about all the things he couldn't give her. Swimming lessons, art classes, a bigger apartment, a backyard, a stable routine that didn't involve him working until 3 a.m. A mother. He pushed that thought away before it could take root. Finish eating, he said gently. We need to leave in 15 minutes. Can I wear my sparkle shoes? It's raining. So? So you'll ruin them. Lily's face fell into that expression she'd perfected, the one that could break his heart in half without her saying a single word. Ethan sighed. Okay, sparkle shoes, but you're wearing your rain jacket. Deal. She demolished her eggs in record time, then raced back to the bathroom to brush her teeth while Ethan cleaned the dishes, grabbed his portfolio bag, and tried to remember if he'd responded to that email from the publisher in Seattle. He checked his phone. No, he hadn't. Added it to his mental list of things to do before noon. The list was getting long. At 6:52 a.m., Ethan stood by the front door with Lily's backpack in one hand and his coffee in the other, watching his daughter struggle to tie her sparkly shoes. She was determined to learn how to do it herself, even though her fingers fumbled with the laces and she kept getting the loops backwards. Need help? He offered. No, I got it. She didn't got it. But Ethan waited patiently because this was important to her, and patience was one of the few things he had left to give. Finally, after 3 attempts and 1 dramatic sigh, Lily managed something that vaguely resembled a bow. Perfect, Ethan said. It's messy. It's perfect because you did it yourself. She beamed at him with that gap-toothed smile that made every sleepless night worth it. They stepped into the hallway together, and Ethan locked the apartment door behind them. The corridor was dim and quiet, lit by a single flickering bulb that the building's super kept promising to replace. The walls were painted a color that might have been beige once, but had faded into something closer to sadness. The carpet was worn thin in the middle from decades of footsteps. But Ethan barely noticed anymore. This was home. He adjusted his grip on the coffee mug, shifted the backpack to his other shoulder, and started walking toward the elevator. Lily skipped ahead, humming that same tuneless song from earlier, and then the door to apartment 4C opened. Ethan didn't see it happen. Not at first. He was too focused on balancing the coffee and the bag and making sure Lily didn't trip over her own shoelaces. But he heard the door, heard the soft sound of footsteps, and then impact. Bodies colliding, coffee flying, papers scattering, everything happening in slow motion and all at once. Ethan stumbled backward, his travel mug spinning out of his hand and hitting the carpet with a dull thud. Hot coffee splashed across his shirt, across the wall, across the person who'd just stepped into the hallway. Shit! The word escaped before Ethan could stop it. Lily gasped. Daddy said a bad word. But Ethan wasn't listening. He was staring at the woman standing in front of him, soaked in coffee, surrounded by scattered papers that were now rapidly absorbing the spilled liquid. She wore a gray jacket that was definitely ruined, dark jeans, and an expression that Ethan couldn't quite read. It was Clara Whitmore, his neighbor, the one he'd seen maybe a dozen times in the past 8 months, always in passing, always with an armful of books or lecture notes, the one who left early every morning and came home late every night, the one Lily called the pretty book lady, because she'd once smiled at them in the elevator. The one Ethan had just drenched in coffee. I'm so sorry, Ethan stammered, already kneeling to gather the papers. I didn't see you. I wasn't looking. I'm so incredibly sorry. Clara stood very still for a moment, looking down at her jacket. Then she did something Ethan didn't expect. She laughed. Not a mean laugh. Not an angry laugh. Just a tired, slightly bewildered laugh that sounded like it came from someone who'd already had a long day despite it being barely 7 a.m. Well, she said, that's one way to start a Thursday. Ethan looked up at her, still on his knees, holding soggy papers. I'll replace your jacket, and it's okay. Clara knelt down beside him and started collecting her own papers. Really, it's just coffee. It's all over you. I've survived worse. But Ethan could see that several of her papers were completely ruined, the ink running into illegible smudges. Lecture notes, from the look of them. Something about the Industrial Revolution and urban development. All of it destroyed because he'd been too tired and too distracted to watch where he was going. Lily approached cautiously, her eyes wide. Are you mad at my daddy? Clara looked at her and smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. No, sweetheart, I'm not mad. He didn't mean to. I know. He's just really tired because he works at night. Lily, Ethan said quietly, embarrassment burning through him. But Clara's expression had shifted into something softer. Understanding, maybe. She gathered the last of her papers, the ones that were still salvageable, and stood up, brushing coffee droplets from her jacket in a futile gesture. I have a class in 40 minutes, she said. I should... Let me make you coffee, Ethan blurted out. Clara blinked. What? New coffee. To replace the one I just threw at you. It's the least I can do. He scrambled to his feet, still holding the ruined papers. It'll take 2 minutes, please. I'll feel terrible all day if you don't let me. He watched her hesitate, checking her watch, clearly calculating whether she had time. Ethan prepared himself for the polite rejection, the one he deserved. But then Clara sighed and nodded. Okay, 2 minutes. 3 minutes later, they were sitting at Ethan's tiny kitchen table, the same one where Lily had eaten breakfast 20 minutes earlier. Clara had draped her wet jacket over the back of a chair and now sat in a simple black sweater, looking at the organized chaos of Ethan's apartment with what seemed like fascination rather than judgment. Lily had immediately claimed the chair next to Clara and begun explaining her ocean animals coloring book in great detail. This is an octopus, but I made him purple because regular octopus colors are boring, Lily was saying, holding up her picture. And this is a whale, but I didn't have enough blue, so I used green instead. Do you think whales can be green? I think whales can be whatever color you want them to be, Clara replied seriously. Lily considered this. Even rainbow? Especially rainbow. Ethan set a fresh mug of coffee in front of Clara, made with the good beans he usually saved for weekends, and noticed the way her shoulders relaxed slightly when she wrapped her hands around it. She looked tired. Not just morning tired, but bone-deep exhausted in a way he recognized because he saw it in his own mirror every day. Thank you, Clara said quietly. It's really the least I could do after assaulting you with breakfast beverages. She smiled into her coffee. It wasn't assault, maybe battery. Is there a legal difference? I teach history, not law, but probably. Ethan sat down across from her, suddenly very aware of how messy his apartment was. Drawings everywhere. Dishes in the sink despite his best efforts. Lily's toys scattered across the floor like a minefield. This was not how he'd imagined finally having a real conversation with Clara Whitmore. Not that he'd imagined it. Well, maybe once or twice. I really am sorry about your notes, he said. Clara waved a hand dismissively. I have digital copies of everything. Learned that lesson the hard way in grad school. She took a sip of coffee and her eyebrows rose slightly. This is really good. Local roaster on 5th Street. They're overpriced but worth it. I'll have to check them out. An awkward silence settled over the table. The kind that happens when two strangers suddenly find themselves sharing coffee at 7 in the morning. Ethan searched for something to say that wouldn't sound completely idiotic. Lily saved him. Do you like coloring? She asked Clara, pushing her book across the table. I do, Clara said, though I'm not very good at it. Nobody's good at it. That's why it's fun. Clara laughed, a real laugh this time, surprised and genuine. That's an excellent philosophy. She picked up one of Lily's crayons and carefully began coloring in a starfish on the page, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. Ethan watched her, feeling something strange and unfamiliar uncurl in his chest. When was the last time someone had sat at his table and colored with his daughter? When was the last time he'd had adult company that wasn't a client meeting or a transaction? He couldn't remember. Your daughter is wonderful, Clara said, not looking up from her coloring. She has her moments. Daddy, Lily protested. I mean, she's wonderful all the time, Ethan corrected quickly. Never any moments. Perfect angel. Lily nodded with satisfaction and went back to her octopus. Clara glanced up at Ethan, and for just a second their eyes met across the table. Something passed between them. Understanding, maybe? Recognition. The shared exhaustion of people who worked too hard and slept too little and kept going anyway because what other choice was there? Then Clara checked her watch and stood abruptly. I really do need to go. My students will revolt if I'm late. What do you teach? Ethan asked, standing as well. European history, 19th century mostly, Industrial Revolution, urbanization, social reform movements. She grabbed her damp jacket and pulled it on, grimacing slightly. Today we're discussing how cities changed during rapid industrialization, which is ironic given that I just got baptized by coffee in a hallway. Ethan winced. Again, I'm really... Don't. Clara held up a hand, smiling. It's fine, honestly. Kind of made my morning more interesting. She moved toward the door, and Ethan followed, with Lily trailing behind. In the doorway, Clara paused and turned back. Thank you for the coffee, she said, and for not being weird about the collision. Thank you for not calling the police. The day's still young. She smiled at him, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes, and something inside Ethan's chest tightened. Then Clara knelt down to Lily's level. I love your octopus, she said seriously. Purple was definitely the right choice. Lily beamed. I know. Clara stood, gave Ethan one last nod, and disappeared into the hallway. Ethan stood in his doorway, watching her go, feeling like something had just happened, but not quite sure what. Daddy, Lily said, tugging on his hand. We're going to be late. Right, yes, school. Ethan grabbed their bags and locked the apartment, his mind still replaying the last 15 minutes. The coffee, the laugh. The way Clara had sat at his table and colored with Lily like it was the most natural thing in the world. They rode the elevator down in silence, walked out into the drizzling rain, and headed toward Lily's school 3 blocks away. The city was fully awake now, cars splashing through puddles, people hurrying past with umbrellas, the smell of rain mixing with exhaust and fresh bread from the bakery on the corner. Ethan barely noticed any of it. He was thinking about Clara's tired smile, the way she'd laughed instead of getting angry, the casual kindness of someone who just had their morning ruined but chose not to make it anyone else's problem. Do you think the book lady will color with me again? Lily asked as they waited at a crosswalk. I don't know, sweetie. I hope so. She's nice. Yeah, Ethan said quietly. She is. They crossed the street and Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. Probably the Seattle publisher, probably another revision request, probably another reminder that his life was a carefully balanced stack of responsibilities that would collapse if he stopped moving for even a second. But for the first time in 8 months, Ethan felt something other than tired. He felt curious. The rest of Thursday passed in a blur of familiar routines. Ethan dropped Lily at school, exchanged pleasantries with Mrs. Patterson, who informed him that Lily was doing wonderfully but could use more practice with her addition facts, and then returned to his apartment to face the mountain of work waiting for him. Email from Seattle. The publisher loved the new bunny, but could he make the background more whimsical? Email from New York. Children's book series needed 3 sample illustrations by Monday. Email from his landlord. Rent was due in 5 days. Ethan made more coffee, opened his laptop, and got to work. This was his life now. This had been his life for 8 months. Wake up, get Lily ready, drop her at school, work until pickup time, spend the afternoon and evening being dad, then work again after she went to bed. Repeat. Every day. No variation, no breaks. No time for anything else. He was good at it now. Efficient. He could sketch a character design while eating lunch. Could answer client emails while helping Lily with homework. Could function on 4 hours of sleep and still meet deadlines. But somewhere in all that efficiency, he'd stopped being anything other than dad and freelance illustrator. He'd stopped being Ethan. Around noon, he took a break to eat something, leftover pasta that tasted like cardboard, and found himself staring at his sketchbook. The personal one. The one that had nothing to do with clients or deadlines or making rent. He couldn't remember the last time he'd opened it. Ethan flipped through the pages slowly. Old drawings from before Lily was born. Street scenes from Philadelphia. Figure studies. Experimental pieces that meant nothing to anyone but him. The last entry was dated almost a year ago, a sketch of Lily sleeping, her hair spread across the pillow like a halo. After that, blank pages. Ethan closed the book and went back to work. At 3 p.m., he picked Lily up from school. She talked nonstop about the water cycle, about her friend Emma's new shoes, about how they'd learned a song that Ethan absolutely had to hear right now, immediately, this very second. He listened with half his attention while the other half worried about deadlines and bills and whether Lily's shoes still fit or if he'd need to buy new ones soon. They stopped at the grocery store, bought eggs, milk, bread, the cheapest pasta sauce available. Lily begged for cookies. Ethan said no. Then yes. Then grabbed the store brand because the name brand was $3 more and $3 mattered. Back at the apartment, Lily did homework at the kitchen table while Ethan started dinner. Spaghetti. Again. They'd had it twice already this week, but it was cheap and Lily would actually eat it. So, spaghetti it was. "Daddy?" Lily said, not looking up from her math worksheet. "Yeah? When can we visit, Grandma?" Ethan's hand stilled on the pot. "I don't know, baby. She called last week and you talked for like 5 minutes. I was busy." "You're always busy." The words hit harder than they should have. Ethan set down the wooden spoon and turned to face his daughter, who was still focused on her math problems, pencil moving across the paper. "I know," he said quietly. "I'm sorry." Lily shrugged, a gesture so small and resigned that it broke something inside him. 6 years old, and she already understood that some things couldn't be helped, that Daddy was busy, that Grandma was far away, that life was just like this now. When had she learned to accept that? They ate dinner, watched a cartoon, did the bedtime routine, bath, pajamas, teeth, 3 storybooks minimum. Lily fell asleep halfway through the second one, her small hand curled around Ethan's sleeve. He stayed there for a while after her breathing deepened into sleep, watched her chest rise and fall, counted her freckles. Wondered if he was doing enough. Wondered if he'd ever do enough. Then he carefully extracted himself, turned on the nightlight, and closed her door most of the way. Back in the living room, Ethan opened his laptop and worked until his eyes burned, revised the whimsical background 4 times, started sketches for the New York series, responded to emails, checked his bank account and did math that didn't add up the way he needed it to. At 1:30 a.m., he finally closed the laptop. His apartment was quiet. The city outside was quiet. Even his thoughts had gone quiet, too exhausted to spiral anymore. Ethan walked to the window and looked out at Montreval's nighttime skyline, streetlights reflected in the river. A few lit windows in neighboring buildings where other people were also awake too late. The distant sound of a siren. This was supposed to be a fresh start. This was supposed to be different. But standing there at 1:30 in the morning, alone in his quiet apartment with nothing but work and worry for company, Ethan couldn't help but wonder if he'd just traded one kind of loneliness for another. He thought about Clara, briefly, about the way she'd laughed in the hallway, about the casual kindness of someone taking time they didn't have to color with a stranger's kid. Then he pushed the thought away because thinking about things like that, about connection, about possibility, about anything beyond the next deadline, was dangerous when your life was held together with duct tape and determination. Ethan closed the curtains and went to bed. Tomorrow would be another Thursday, another early morning, another collision with routine, except it wouldn't be. Because across the hall, Clara Whitmore was sitting at her own desk, grading papers and thinking about the strange, sweet interaction she'd had that morning, about the single father with the kind eyes and the exhausted smile, about his daughter who made purple octopuses and spoke with complete confidence about things that didn't matter. And in 3 days, Clara would do something she almost never did. She would reach out. She would send a message. And that message would be the second collision, the one that actually mattered. But Ethan didn't know that yet. So he closed his eyes and tried to sleep, while 3 feet of hallway and 1 wooden door kept 2 tired people separate in their separate lives, not knowing that the morning collision had already started something neither of them could stop. Not knowing that spilled coffee and scattered papers were just the beginning. Not knowing that sometimes the most important chapters of life don't start with grand plans. They start with accidents in quiet hallways and people brave enough to say yes to coffee. The city slept. Ethan slept. And across the hall, Clara sat awake in the blue light of her laptop, typing out a message she hadn't sent yet. There's a bookstore on 7th Street that one of my students mentioned. Supposed to be good for kids. Thought you might like it. She stared at the words for 10 minutes, then deleted them. Then wrote them again, slightly different. My student recommended a bookstore, show good kids section. If you and Lily ever want to check it out. Delete. Rewrite. Delete. Finally, she closed her laptop without sending anything, telling herself it was weird to message neighbors you barely knew, telling herself he was probably too busy anyway, telling herself a dozen reasons why reaching out was a bad idea. But the message stayed in her drafts. And 3 days later, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, Clara would stop overthinking and just press send. And everything would change. Sunday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine breaking through Montreval's usual fog. Ethan woke to Lily's weight on his chest and her finger poking his nose with scientific precision. "Daddy, you're snoring like a dragon." "Dragons don't snore," he mumbled, eyes still closed. "How do you know? Have you met one?" "Valid point," Lily giggled and poked his nose again. "Can we have pancakes?" Ethan cracked one eye open and looked at his daughter's hopeful face, hovering inches from his own. Her hair was a disaster, sticking up in 7 different directions like she'd been struck by lightning. She was wearing her pajamas inside out, and she was smiling at him like he held the keys to the entire universe. "Pancakes require ingredients we don't have." "We have flour." "Do we?" I checked. Of course she had. Ethan sat up slowly, his back protesting every movement. He'd worked until 3 in the morning finishing the New York samples, then collapsed fully clothed on the couch. His neck felt like someone had replaced his vertebrae with broken glass. "Okay," he said, running a hand through his own disaster of hair. "Pancakes. But you're helping." "Deal." 20 minutes later, the kitchen looked like a flour bomb had detonated. Lily stood on a chair next to the stove, very seriously stirring batter, while Ethan supervised and tried not to think about the mess they'd have to clean up later. She'd insisted on adding chocolate chips, because regular pancakes are boring, Daddy, and somehow half the bag had ended up on the floor. But she was happy, humming that tuneless song, covered in flour, completely absorbed in the task, and Ethan realized he couldn't remember the last time they'd done something like this together. Something that wasn't efficient or scheduled or part of the routine, something just for fun. "First one's ready," he said, sliding a slightly misshapen pancake onto a plate. Lily inspected it critically. "It looks like a blob. It's an artistic blob. Can I eat it?" "That's generally what we do with pancakes." She grabbed a fork and took a huge bite, syrup dripping down her chin. Her eyes went wide. "Daddy, this is amazing." It was barely edible. Undercooked in the middle, burned on the edges, but Ethan smiled anyway. "Glad you approve, Chef." They ate breakfast together at the small table, making their way through a stack of progressively better pancakes while morning light streamed through the window. Lily talked about absolutely everything. Her dreams, her theories about why squirrels were secretly planning world domination, whether mermaids paid taxes. Ethan listened and laughed and felt something loosen in his chest. Something that had been wound tight for 8 months. Then his phone buzzed. He almost ignored it. Weekends were supposed to be sacred, reserved for Lily, but freelancer instinct kicked in. Could be a client, could be urgent, could be another rent payment. He checked the screen. It was a message, but not from a client, from Clara Whitmore. Ethan stared at her name for several seconds, his brain temporarily short-circuiting. His neighbor, the coffee collision woman. The history professor who'd colored with Lily and then disappeared back into her own life across the hall. She was messaging him on a Sunday morning. "Daddy?" Lily waved a syrup-covered hand in front of his face. "You're being weird." "Sorry." Ethan opened the message, his heart doing something strange and uncomfortable in his chest. "Hi, Ethan. This is Clara from across the hall. One of my students mentioned a bookstore on 7th Street, The Wandering Page. Supposed to have a great kids section. Thought you and Lily might enjoy it. Hope that's not weird." See, Ethan read it twice, then 3 times. It wasn't weird. Or maybe it was slightly weird, but also kind of thoughtful. He didn't know the protocol for neighbor messaging. They'd had exactly one conversation, which had mostly consisted of him apologizing for covering her in coffee. And now she was recommending bookstores. "Who is it?" Lily asked, craning her neck to see the phone. "Nobody. Daddy, when you say nobody in that voice, it's always somebody." 6 years old, and she could already read him perfectly. Ethan set the phone down and focused on his daughter's chocolate-smeared face. "It's Clara. From across the hall, the book lady." Lily's entire face lit up. "What did she say?" "She told us about a bookstore." "Can we go? Please? Right now? Immediately?" "We're covered in pancake batter. So we'll wash, then we'll go." "Please, Daddy." Lily deployed the weapon she knew was unbeatable, her absolute biggest, most hopeful eyes. "We never do fun things on Sundays." That hit harder than it should have. Ethan thought about his typical Sunday: catch up on laundry, meal prep for the week, squeeze in work he couldn't finish during the week, maybe take Lily to the park if he wasn't completely exhausted. When had Sunday become just another day to survive? He looked at his daughter, then at his phone, then back at his daughter. "Okay," he heard himself say, "let's go to the bookstore." Lily actually screamed with joy, a sound so pure and excited that it made Ethan's chest ache. She launched herself off the chair and raced toward the bathroom, leaving a trail of syrup footprints behind her. Ethan picked up his phone again and stared at Clara's message. He should probably respond. But what did he say? "Thanks for the recommendation? Want to join us?" Was that too forward? Not forward enough? He settled for simple. "Thanks for the tip. We'll check it out today." Sent. 3 seconds later, typing indicator. Ethan's heart rate increased for absolutely no logical reason. Clara's response appeared. "If you want company, I'm free this afternoon. No pressure, though." Ethan stared at the words. Company. She was offering company, a casual bookstore trip with his neighbor, completely normal, not complicated. Just 3 people looking at books. Except his palms were sweating. Except he was already mentally cataloging everything that could go wrong. Except some small buried part of him that had been dormant for 8 months was suddenly very, very awake. "Daddy!" Lily's voice rang from the bathroom. "Is the book lady coming with us?" How did she know? Ethan walked to the bathroom doorway and found Lily attempting to brush her hair, achieving limited success. "I haven't answered yet." "Tell her yes. You don't even know what she asked." "She asked to come with us. I can tell by your face." Lily abandoned the hairbrush and looked at her father with an expression far too knowing for a 6-year-old. "You like her?" "I barely know her." "You get all smiley when you talk about her." "I do not get smiley." "You're being smiley right now." Ethan realized he was in fact smiling. He forced his face into a neutral expression. "I'm messaging her back. Don't read into things." But his fingers were already typing. Company sounds good. 2 o'clock? Clara's response came almost immediately. "Perfect. Meet in the hallway? See you then." Ethan set his phone down and found Lily grinning at him like she'd just won a prize. "Don't start," he warned. "I didn't say anything." "You're thinking it loudly." She giggled and went back to wrestling with her hair, while Ethan leaned against the doorframe and wondered what exactly he'd just agreed to. A bookstore trip. With his neighbor. And his very observant daughter who would absolutely notice every awkward moment. This was fine. Totally fine. Just 3 people looking at books on a Sunday afternoon. Nothing to panic about. At 1:45 p.m., Ethan changed his shirt for the 3rd time. The first one had a stain he hadn't noticed. The second one felt too formal. The third one, a simple gray Henley, seemed appropriately casual while also not looking like he'd given up on life. "You're being weird again," Lily observed from her position on the couch, where she was reading a book about dinosaurs. "I'm not being weird. You changed your shirt 3 times. How do you know that?" "I can see the other shirts on your bed." Ethan gave up trying to hide anything from his unnaturally perceptive daughter. He checked his reflection one more time, hair somewhat under control, face recently shaved, shirt stain-free, and decided this was as good as it was going to get. At exactly 2 o'clock, they stepped into the hallway. Clara emerged from her apartment at the exact same moment. For a second, they both froze, a mirror image of their Thursday collision, except this time nobody was holding coffee. Clara wore jeans and a soft blue sweater that made her eyes look impossibly bright. Her hair was down instead of pulled back, falling past her shoulders in dark waves. She'd clearly put in more effort than just rolled out of bed, which made Ethan feel slightly better about his own mild panic over shirts. Hi, Clara said, smiling. Hi, Ethan replied, feeling like a teenager on a first date and hating himself for it. Hi, book lady. Lily solved the awkwardness by immediately taking Clara's hand. Did you know that some dinosaurs had feathers? I'm reading all about it. Most people think they had scales, but actually scientists discovered that lots of them had feathers, which means they probably looked like giant chickens, and that's way less scary than the movies make them seem. Clara laughed, that same genuine surprised laugh from Thursday, and let Lily pull her toward the elevator. I did know that actually. We cover evolutionary theory in some of my classes. Do you teach about dinosaurs? Not specifically, but we talk about how scientific understanding changes over time. That's cool. Daddy just draws pictures. Hey, Ethan protested, following them. I draw very important pictures. Of bunnies. That bunny is aspirational. Clara glanced back at him, eyebrows raised. Aspirational bunny? Don't ask. They rode the elevator down together, Lily chattering nonstop about dinosaurs while Clara listened with what seemed like genuine interest. Ethan stood slightly to the side, watching the interaction and feeling something complicated unfold in his chest. When was the last time Lily had talked to another adult like this? When was the last time someone had actually listened to her 6-year-old logic and responded like it mattered? The Wandering Page was a 20-minute walk through Montreval's historic district. Narrow streets lined with old brick buildings, window boxes overflowing with late-blooming flowers, the constant backdrop of the river glittering in afternoon sun. Lily skipped ahead while Ethan and Clara followed at a more reasonable pace. Thanks for the recommendation, Ethan said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. We don't get out much. We get out, obviously. We leave the apartment, but not for fun things. Mostly just necessary things. School, groceries, laundromat. He was rambling. He needed to stop rambling. Sorry, I'm not great at this. At what? Clara asked. Casual conversation with adults? It's been a while. How long is a while? Ethan thought about it. 8 months of mostly talking to a 6-year-old. Before that, he trailed off, not wanting to get into the complicated history of before Montreval. A while. Clara nodded slowly, her expression understanding rather than pitying. I get it. I moved to Montreval 2 years ago for the university position. Spent the first year buried in research and lesson planning. Looked up one day and realized I'd barely left campus except to sleep. And the second year? More of the same, honestly, but with slightly better coffee. She smiled at him, a self-deprecating smile that made her seem more human, less like the polished professor he'd built up in his head. I'm not great at the social thing either. Most of my meaningful relationships are with 18th century historical figures. Are they good conversationalists? Terrible. Very one-sided. Ethan laughed, surprised by how easy this felt. How normal. Like talking to someone he'd known for longer than 4 days and one coffee collision. They caught up to Lily, who'd stopped to examine a window display of handmade pottery. Then continued walking, the three of them falling into an easy rhythm. Lily would dart ahead to investigate something interesting, then circle back to tell them about her discoveries. Clara asked questions that actually engaged with Lily's logic rather than dismissing it as kid nonsense, and Ethan found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in months. The Wandering Page occupied a narrow building squeezed between a cafe and a vintage clothing shop. The front window displayed a chaotic arrangement of books stacked in precarious towers, with handwritten recommendation cards tucked between them. A small sign hanging above the door declared, "New books, old books, books that bite, come in anyway." Lily pressed her nose against the window. It looks like a library had a baby with a jungle. That's exactly what it looks like, Clara agreed. They pushed through the door into a space that was somehow bigger on the inside, or maybe just so packed with shelves that it created the illusion of endlessness. Books climbed the walls in floor-to-ceiling cases. More books filled tables in the center. Still more books teetered in stacks on the floor, creating narrow pathways between sections. The smell hit Ethan immediately. Old paper, new paper, coffee from somewhere in the back, and something indefinable that all good bookstores seemed to share. A woman behind the counter looked up from her own reading and smiled. "Welcome to Organized Chaos. Kids section is upstairs, through the green archway. Yell if you need anything." Lily was already gone, racing toward a spiral staircase in the corner. "Lily, wait," Ethan started. "Let her explore," Clara said gently. "We can see the stairs from here. She'll be fine." Ethan watched his daughter disappear upward, fighting the instinct to follow. He'd gotten so used to monitoring every moment, anticipating every danger. The idea of letting Lily just be in a space without his direct supervision felt wrong. But Clara was right. He could see the staircase, hear Lily's excited gasp from above as she discovered whatever was up there. And maybe, just maybe, he could allow himself 5 minutes of not being in full dad mode. "You're worried," Clara observed. "I'm always worried. Comes with the territory." "The single-parent territory?" Ethan glanced at her sharply, but there was no judgment in her expression, just understanding. "How did you know?" "Lily mentioned it Thursday morning. Said you work at night because you're too busy during the day." Clara moved toward a shelf labeled Local History and began browsing absently. "Plus, you have that look." "What look?" "The one that says you're carrying everything yourself." The observation landed with unexpected weight. Ethan followed Clara to the shelf, not really seeing the books in front of him. "I've been doing this alone for 8 months. Before that it was—" He stopped, not sure how much to share with someone who was essentially still a stranger. But Clara waited patiently, not pushing, just listening in that way that made him want to keep talking. "It was complicated," he finished. "Lily's mom isn't in the picture. Hasn't been for a while. We moved here to start fresh. New city, new life, just the two of us." "That's brave." Ethan laughed, but it came out bitter. "Brave or stupid, still determining which. Like, can't it be both?" He looked at Clara then, really looked at her, saw the kindness in her eyes, the absence of pity or awkwardness that usually came when he mentioned his situation. Just acceptance, like his messy, complicated life was perfectly normal and okay. "What about you?" he asked. "What brought you to Montreval?" Clara pulled a book from the shelf, something about industrial architecture, and flipped through it without really reading. The job, initially, but also— She hesitated, choosing words carefully. "I spent my 20s building a career, published papers, earned my PhD, networked at conferences, did everything I was supposed to do. And then I got the offer here and realized I'd been so focused on the career part that I'd forgotten to build an actual life." "Did you? Build one here?" "I teach, I research, I grade papers until my eyes cross." Clara put the book back. "I have colleagues I get coffee with sometimes, students who occasionally remember my name after the semester ends, and a very nice view of the river from my apartment. But I'm starting to suspect that's not the same thing as having a life." The honesty in her voice made something crack open in Ethan's chest. Here was someone else who'd reduced existence to routines and responsibilities. Someone else who functioned perfectly well on the surface while feeling hollow underneath. "Daddy, Clara, you have to see this." Lily's voice carried down from above, urgent with excitement. Ethan and Clara exchanged a look, the universal expression of adults being summoned by an enthusiastic child, and headed for the stairs. The second floor was devoted entirely to children's books, but calling it a section didn't do it justice. Someone had transformed the space into a wonderland of reading nooks, each one themed around different genres. A pirate ship made of bookshelves, a castle with beanbag thrones, a tree fort with a ladder, and in the corner, a massive reading chair that looked like it belonged in a giant's house, currently occupied by Lily. "It's enormous," she announced, barely visible behind the chair's high arms. "I could live here forever and just read books and eat cookies and never leave." "Sounds like a solid life plan," Clara said, climbing into the chair beside Lily. The chair was indeed enormous, easily big enough for 3 adults, which meant it swallowed Lily and Clara completely. Only their heads poked above the armrest. "There's room for you too, Daddy," Lily called. Ethan hesitated. The chair was ridiculous. Climbing into it with his neighbor and daughter would be ridiculous. But they were both looking at him expectantly, and he was tired of being sensible all the time. He climbed in. The 3 of them sat squished together in the absurd chair, Lily in the middle, surrounded by shelves of children's books in every direction. It was warm and slightly absurd and completely unnecessary. It was perfect. "Pick a book," Clara said to Lily. "Any book." Lily scanned the nearby shelves with intense concentration, then pointed to a bright blue spine. That one! Clara stretched, barely reaching it, and pulled down a picture book about a girl who built a rocket ship from recycled materials. Without discussion, she opened it and began reading aloud. Her voice was different when she read. Not the professor voice Ethan imagined she used in lectures. Softer, more animated. She did different voices for different characters, which made Lily giggle and lean closer. Ethan sat very still, acutely aware of Clara's shoulder pressed against his, the warmth of Lily's small body tucked between them, the gentle rhythm of the story unfolding. When was the last time he'd been part of a moment like this? When was the last time he'd felt this specific type of contentment? He couldn't remember. The story ended. Lily immediately requested another. Clara glanced at Ethan, a silent question. Is this okay? He nodded. She read 3 more books. Then Lily demanded that Ethan read one, which he did in his best ridiculous voices, earning real laughs from his daughter, and something that looked like genuine delight from Clara. Time became elastic in the giant reading chair. Could have been 20 minutes, could have been 2 hours. Ethan lost track, lost in the simple pleasure of stories and company, and not thinking about deadlines or bills or anything beyond this small bubble of warmth. Eventually, Lily's stomach growled loud enough to interrupt the narrative. I think that's nature's way of saying we should find food, Clara said, checking her watch. Oh, it's almost 5. They'd been in the bookstore for 3 hours. 3 hours that had felt like 30 minutes. They climbed out of the chair, less gracefully than they'd climbed in, and made their way back downstairs. Lily clutched 2 books she'd absolutely insisted on getting. Ethan paid while trying not to think about how the $30 could have bought groceries instead, but the look on Lily's face made it worth it. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted Montreval's streets in shades of gold. The temperature had dropped slightly, carrying hints of evening chill. There's a cafe around the corner, Clara said, pointing. If you're interested. Lily grabbed Clara's hand before Ethan could answer. Yes, I'm starving. I could eat a whole dinosaur. A whole one seems ambitious, Clara said seriously. Maybe start with a half dinosaur. They found the cafe, a small place called Rosie's with mismatched furniture and chalkboard menus, and claimed a table by the window. Lily ordered hot chocolate with excessive whipped cream. Clara got tea. Ethan ordered coffee even though it was almost evening and he'd regret it later. The waitress brought a basket of pastries, on the house, she said, because Lily was adorable, and Lily set about systematically demolishing a chocolate croissant. So, Clara said, wrapping her hands around her tea mug, tell me about the aspirational bunny. Ethan groaned. You're not going to let that go, are you? Absolutely not. So he told her about the children's book client who kept changing the concept, about trying to make a bunny convey complex emotional states through facial expressions alone, about the feedback loop of revisions that seemed to have no end. Clara listened with what seemed like genuine fascination, asking questions about his process, his training, how he'd gotten into illustration in the first place. And Ethan talked, really talked, about art school before Lily was born, about the decision to go freelance, about the strange satisfaction of making a living from something he'd loved since childhood, even when that living was precarious. Do you still love it? Clara asked. The question stopped him. What? Drawing. Do you still love it? Or has it become just the job? Ethan considered this while Lily built a croissant fortress from crumbs. I don't know. I love the work I do for clients, mostly. It pays bills, keeps us fed, but... He trailed off, not sure how to explain. But? Clara prompted gently. But I can't remember the last time I drew something just because I wanted to. Something that wasn't for a deadline or a client or anyone but me. Why not? No time, no energy, no... He stopped, realizing how hollow the excuses sounded. I don't know. Clara studied him across the table with those perceptive eyes that seemed to see past all his carefully constructed defenses. What would you draw? If you had time and energy and no other reason needed? The question landed in his chest and stayed there. What would he draw? Before he could answer, Lily interrupted. Daddy draws me sometimes, when I'm sleeping. I've seen the pictures in his secret sketchbook. It's not secret, Ethan protested. It's in the locked drawer. It's not locked. You just can't reach it. Same thing. Clara smiled into her tea. Secret sketchbook of sleeping children. That's not creepy at all. When you say it like that, I'm teasing. Her expression softened. I think it's sweet. The conversation shifted then. Clara talked about her research, about urbanization patterns in 19th century Europe, about how cities changed when people flooded in from rural areas, about the social tensions that emerged from rapid growth. She spoke with passion, her hands moving to illustrate points, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. And Ethan realized this was what she looked like when talking about something she actually cared about, rather than just going through academic motions. I'm boring you, Clara said suddenly. No, not at all. Ethan searched for the right words. I don't think I've ever heard someone talk about history like it's a living thing, like it matters right now. It does matter right now. Everything that's happening in cities today, gentrification, housing crises, infrastructure problems, it's all echoes of patterns that started centuries ago. She stopped herself, laughing self-consciously. Sorry, I get intense about this stuff. Don't apologize. Ethan met her eyes across the table. It's really interesting. Something passed between them in that moment. A recognition, an understanding, the awareness that they were both people who'd buried their passions under responsibilities and were just now remembering what it felt like to care about something beyond survival. Lily, oblivious to the moment, announced that she needed the bathroom. Clara offered to take her, giving Ethan a few minutes alone with his thoughts and his cooling coffee. He looked around the cafe, at the other customers talking and laughing, at the warm light spilling through windows, at the ordinary Sunday evening scene playing out around him. For 8 months, he'd moved through Montreval without really seeing it. Just endpoints on a map. Apartment, school, grocery store, back to apartment. But sitting here, in this cafe he'd never noticed before, with people he'd barely known 4 days ago, Ethan felt something shift, like his world was expanding beyond the narrow confines he'd built around it. Clara and Lily returned, and they lingered over empty mugs and picked over pastries, talking about nothing important. Lily demonstrated her new joke she'd learned at school. It didn't make sense, but they laughed anyway. Clara shared a story about a student who'd written an entire essay analyzing the Industrial Revolution through the lens of zombie movies. Ethan described his ongoing war with the building's temperamental elevator. Easy conversation, normal conversation, the kind that happened between people who were comfortable with each other. Eventually, the cafe owners started giving them pointed looks, and they took the hint. Outside, the city had settled into early evening, streetlights flickering on, the river reflecting the last traces of sunset. They walked back slowly, Lily between them, holding both their hands and skipping every few steps. This was nice, Clara said quietly. Yeah, Ethan agreed, really nice. Can we do it again sometime? The question hung in the air between them. Casual, but also not casual. An invitation that could mean everything or nothing depending on how he answered. Ethan thought about his schedule, about deadlines and responsibilities, about all the reasons this was complicated. Then he looked at Lily, happily swinging between them, and at Clara's hopeful expression, and decided that maybe complicated was okay. I'd like that, he said. Clara's smile was worth every anxiety he'd felt all afternoon. They reached their building and rode the elevator up in companionable silence. In the hallway, they paused outside their respective doors. Thank you for today, Ethan said. For the recommendation, for joining us, He gestured vaguely, encompassing everything. Thank you for letting me tag along. Clara crouched down to Lily's level. And thank you for teaching me about feathered dinosaurs. You're welcome. We can talk about pterodactyls next time. I look forward to it. Clara straightened, gave Ethan one more smile, and disappeared into her apartment. Ethan unlocked his own door and ushered Lily inside, his mind still processing the afternoon. The books, the cafe, the easy conversation that shouldn't have been possible with someone he barely knew, but somehow was. As he helped Lily get ready for bed, she chattered nonstop about the bookstore and the giant chair and how Clara did the best funny voices. And Ethan listened, feeling lighter than he had in months. Later, after Lily finally fell asleep clutching one of her new books, Ethan found himself standing in front of the locked drawer where he kept his personal sketchbook. Not locked, just high up where small hands couldn't reach. He pulled it out, flipped past the old drawings, and stared at the blank pages. Clara's question echoed in his mind. What would you draw? For months, the answer had been nothing. No time, no energy, no point. But tonight, sitting at his small kitchen table with a pencil in his hand, Ethan started sketching. Not for a client, not for money, just because something inside him wanted to be expressed. He drew the bookstore, the spiral staircase, the giant reading chair. Lily's delighted expression when she discovered it. Then, almost without meaning to, he drew Clara, just her face. The way she'd looked while reading to Lily, absorbed, animated, fully present in the moment. Ethan studied the sketch, surprised by how easily it had come, how natural it felt to translate that memory onto paper. He'd forgotten this feeling, the pure joy of creating something just because it wanted to exist. 3 days later, Ethan found a book outside his apartment door. No note, just a slim collection of essays about cities and artists wrapped in brown paper. He knew immediately who'd left it. That evening, after Lily was asleep, he read the entire thing. Essays about how urban spaces inspired creativity, how artists saw cities differently than other people, how place and art were inextricably connected. One essay discussed Montreval specifically, its history as a river trading post, its evolution into a cultural center, the way artists had always been drawn to its particular quality of light. Ethan set the book down and looked out his window at the city he'd been living in without truly seeing. The river, the old architecture, the way streetlights reflected on wet cobblestones after rain. He picked up his sketchbook and started drawing again. Over the next week, the drawings accumulated. Street scenes, architectural details, the view from his window at different times of day, all the small, beautiful things he'd been too exhausted to notice before. And every night, before he closed the sketchbook, he added something new. A corner of the bookstore, a detail from the cafe, the shape of Clara's hands wrapped around a tea mug, small moments, quiet memories, life translated into lines and shadows. He was drawing again, really drawing. And somewhere across the hall, Clara was grading papers and thinking about the single father with the kind eyes and the sleeping daughter. Wondering if leaving that book had been too forward. Wondering if he'd even read it. Wondering if she'd been imagining the connection she'd felt during that long afternoon in the bookstore. But she didn't know that Ethan was drawing, that her casual gift had unlocked something in him, that every evening now included time spent translating his expanding world onto paper. She wouldn't know for weeks yet. Not until everything changed again. Not until the exhibition. But for now, in their separate apartments divided by 3 feet of hallway and 1 wooden door, 2 people were slowly learning to live again instead of just surviving. And sometimes that's how the most important changes begin. Not with grand gestures, but with small books left outside doors and sketches drawn late at night when the rest of the world is sleeping. The drawings had taken over Ethan's life in ways he hadn't anticipated. What started as occasional evening sketches had evolved into something closer to obsession. Every night after Lily fell asleep, he'd pull out his sketchbook and lose himself in capturing moments that had somehow become precious. The bookstore's spiral staircase, rendered in careful detail. The cafe table where they'd sat, with 3 distinct coffee rings still visible in his memory. Montreval's streets at different hours, early morning fog, afternoon sunlight, evening shadows. And Clara. Always Clara, appearing in the margins, her profile as she read, her hands gesturing while she explained something about urban history, the way she laughed with her whole body, head thrown back slightly, eyes crinkling at the corners. Ethan told himself it was just practice, figure studies, observational drawing, nothing more complicated than an artist documenting his expanding world. He was lying to himself, but it was a comfortable lie. 3 weeks after the bookstore afternoon, their casual friendship had settled into something resembling routine. Clara would text about a new cafe she'd discovered. Ethan would invite her to join them at the park. Lily had decided that Clara was basically family now, and talked about her constantly. "Can Clara come to my school presentation?" she'd asked one morning while eating cereal. "I don't know, baby. She's probably busy." "You should ask. It's a 2nd grade presentation about the solar system. I think Clara has actual important things to do." "Daddy, everything I do is important." Hard to argue with that logic. But Ethan didn't ask, because asking felt like crossing some invisible line from casual friendship into something else. Something that required acknowledgement of the fact that he thought about Clara more than was probably appropriate for someone he'd known less than a month. something that required admitting he was developing feelings he had absolutely no space for in his carefully balanced life. So he kept drawing instead, kept translating those feelings into graphite and paper where they were safe, where they couldn't complicate anything. Then Clara mentioned the cultural showcase. It happened during one of their now regular coffee meetings at Rosie's. Lily was at school, and Ethan had finished his morning client work early. Clara had a gap between lectures. They'd fallen into this habit of these midweek meetings, an hour stolen from their respective responsibilities to just talk. The university does this thing every semester, Clara was saying, stirring sugar into her tea with meticulous precision. Cultural showcase, student performances, art displays, faculty presentations. It's usually pretty low-key, but the department chair keeps pushing for more community engagement, so this time they're making it a bigger deal. Sounds nice, Ethan said, only half paying attention. He was watching the way afternoon light caught in her hair, mentally cataloging the exact shade so he could sketch it later. I'm giving a short talk about my research. 20 minutes on urbanization and social change. Riveting stuff. I'm sure it's fascinating. You're a terrible liar. Clara smiled at him over her mug. But it's sweet that you try. When is it? 3 weeks from Friday. Evening event starts at 7. She paused, and something in her expression shifted, became almost vulnerable. You could come, if you wanted. No pressure. I know you're busy and finding a sitter is probably complicated, and it's really not that interesting. I'll be there, Ethan interrupted. Clara's eyes widened slightly. Really? Really, Lily's been asking to see where you work anyway. This gives me an excuse to actually follow through. The smile that spread across Clara's face made something warm unfold in Ethan's chest, like he'd given her an actual gift instead of just agreeing to attend a university event. They talked for another 40 minutes about nothing important. Clara's impossible students who plagiarized from Wikipedia. Ethan's client who wanted a friendlier dinosaur for a children's book. The weather. The upcoming election. The best places to get pizza in Montreval. Easy conversation that felt like breathing. When they finally parted ways outside the cafe, Clara touched his arm briefly. Thank you for saying you'd come. It means more than you know. Then she was gone, hurrying back to campus for her afternoon seminar, leaving Ethan standing on the sidewalk trying to figure out when exactly his feelings had shifted from friendly to something significantly more complicated. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan made a decision that was either brilliant or incredibly stupid, possibly both. He was going to create something for the showcase. Not just attend, participate. A series of illustrations that captured what these past few weeks had meant to him. The way Montreval had transformed from just a place he lived into somewhere that felt like home. The way his world had expanded from the narrow confines of deadlines and survival into something richer, fuller. The way Clara had changed everything without even trying. He wouldn't tell her. It would be a surprise. A way of saying thank you for the book, for the bookstore, for reminding him that he was still an artist underneath all the freelance hustle. A way of saying other things he wasn't ready to speak out loud. Ethan pulled out fresh paper, the good stuff he saved for important work, and started planning. He'd need at least 8 pieces to make a decent showing. 8 illustrations that told a story without words, that captured transformation and connection and quiet moments that mattered. He had 3 weeks. It wasn't enough time. He'd make it enough. The next morning, Ethan called the university's Cultural Affairs office and somehow convinced a very bored work-study student to add him to the showcase roster. Local artist, he'd said. Community engagement. The student had barely listened, just added his name to a spreadsheet and told him he'd have wall space in the humanities corridor. Easy. Now he just had to create 8 perfect illustrations in 3 weeks while maintaining his regular client load and being a functional parent. Completely manageable. Ethan was definitely going to lose his mind. The first week was chaos. He worked during Lily's school hours, powered through client revisions at inhuman speed, then stayed up until 2 or 3 in the morning working on the showcase pieces. Coffee became his primary food group. Sleep became optional. But the drawings came together with an intensity he hadn't felt since art school, each piece built on the last, telling a visual story of transformation. The first illustration showed a small apartment interior, clearly lived in but isolated. a single figure at a desk, surrounded by work, separated from the world outside. The second showed the same space, but with light spilling in from an open door. The third captured the bookstore, narrow aisles, climbing shelves, the spiral staircase leading upward, a sense of discovery. The fourth was the reading chair, 3 figures, 2 adults, 1 child, compressed together in that absurd piece of furniture surrounded by stories. Ethan worked in layers, building depth through careful cross-hatching and selective use of color. Mostly black and white with strategic touches of warmth, a blue sweater, a child's purple socks, golden afternoon light. "Daddy, you look like a zombie," Lily observed one morning, studying his face with clinical precision. "Thanks, baby. Really needed that confidence boost." "I'm just saying, your eyes are all red and you forgot to make my lunch yesterday." Guilt stabbed through him. "I forgot? I used my milk money to buy crackers. It's okay. Emma shared her sandwich." It wasn't okay. Ethan was so focused on the drawings that he was dropping actual parenting responsibilities. He made Lily an elaborate lunch, her favorite turkey and cheese sandwich, apple slices, the good cookies, and added an extra juice box as apology. "Are you drawing something special?" Lily asked, watching him pack her lunchbox with unusual care. "Maybe." "Is it for Clara?" Ethan's hand stilled. "What makes you say that?" "Because you get the same look when you talk about your drawings that you get when you talk about her." Lily tilted her head, far too perceptive. "The smiley look." "I don't have a smiley look." "You super do." There was no point arguing with the 6-year-old who saw through him completely. "The drawings are for the showcase at Clara's university. So, yes, kind of for her, but also for me, and for other people who'll see them." "Can I see them?" "Not yet. They're a surprise." Lily accepted this with a solemn nod. "I'm good at keeping surprises." She was not good at keeping surprises, but Ethan trusted that her school day would keep her too distracted to accidentally spoil anything. The second week brought unexpected complications. A major client pushed up a deadline by 5 days. Lily caught a cold and needed to stay home from school for 2 days, which meant 0 work time and a cranky 6-year-old who wanted constant attention. And Ethan's ancient laptop decided to have a minor breakdown, requiring an expensive repair he couldn't afford but couldn't avoid. The showcase drawings slowed to a crawl. Ethan found himself working in stolen moments, 15 minutes, while Lily watched cartoons, half an hour after she fell asleep before exhaustion claimed him. The illustrations were taking shape, but not fast enough. He still had 4 pieces to complete and less than a week remaining. Clara texted, "How's everything going?" Ethan stared at his phone, at the casual question that carried no awareness of his growing panic. He could tell her, could admit he was creating something for the showcase, could ask for an extension or backing out gracefully. Instead, he typed, "Busy, but good. Looking forward to Friday." Her response came quickly. "Me too. Fair warning, my talk will probably put you to sleep. I'll bring coffee." My hero. Ethan set his phone down and looked at the half-finished illustration in front of him, a kitchen table scene with scattered drawings and 2 coffee mugs. One of his favorites so far. But it needed another 10 hours of work, and he had maybe 5 hours available before the deadline. He could do this. He had to do this. Because somewhere in the past 3 weeks, these drawings had stopped being just a thank you gesture. They'd become something more essential, a way of processing everything that had changed, a way of admitting feelings he couldn't speak out loud, a way of being brave when bravery had never been his strong suit. The third week was pure survival mode. Ethan slept in 90-minute increments between work sessions, lived on coffee and whatever food required minimal preparation. Let Lily watch more TV than he normally allowed while he drew at the kitchen table, racing against time and his own limitations. Wednesday night, with 2 days remaining, he finished the 7th illustration. A quiet apartment scene, the same one from the first drawing but transformed, no longer isolated, light everywhere. A father sketching while his daughter slept nearby, peaceful and safe. Contentment captured in graphite and careful shading. One more piece to go. Ethan pulled out fresh paper and stared at the blank surface. The final illustration needed to tie everything together, needed to show completion without ending, growth without resolution. He knew what he wanted to draw, had known since the beginning, even though he'd been avoiding it. He started sketching Clara. Not a study this time, not a practice piece. A real portrait that showed everything he'd been too scared to say, the way she looked when she laughed, the intelligence in her eyes, the kindness that seemed effortless, the beauty that had nothing to do with conventional features and everything to do with the person underneath. Ethan worked through the night, through Thursday morning, through Lily's breakfast and school drop-off, and the entire day. His hands cramped, his eyes burned, but the drawing came together piece by piece, line by line, until Clara's face stared back at him from the paper, achingly real and impossibly vulnerable. He signed it at 4 a.m. Friday morning, then collapsed on his couch for 3 hours of unconsciousness that barely qualified as sleep. At noon, Ethan loaded the 8 illustrations into a portfolio case with shaking hands. He'd arranged for the university's cultural affairs office to handle the actual hanging. They had professional equipment and knew the wall space. All he had to do was deliver the pieces and trust they'd be displayed properly. All he had to do was let go of control and hope this insane idea wasn't a terrible mistake. The work-study student from before met him in the humanities corridor, a long hallway with high ceilings and excellent natural light, perfect for displaying art. Other pieces were already mounted: photography, mixed media, a few paintings. "Where do you want them?" the student asked, barely looking up from her phone. Ethan surveyed the available wall space. "There, that section with the good afternoon light. Whatever, I'll have them up by 4. Can I—" "No, you can't help. Liability. You'll see them at the showcase tonight like everyone else." Ethan reluctantly handed over his portfolio, feeling like he was surrendering pieces of himself. The student took it with zero ceremony and shooed him away. Walking out of the building, Ethan felt untethered, vulnerable, like he'd just exposed something deeply private to public scrutiny. For 8 months he'd kept his head down, kept his art commercial and safe, kept his feelings buried under responsibility. And now he'd created something painfully honest and hung it on a university wall for strangers to judge. He was either incredibly brave or spectacularly stupid. The day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Ethan picked up Lily from school, helped her with homework, made dinner that neither of them ate much of because they were both too excited about the evening ahead. Lily had been promised she could stay up late for the showcase, which in her mind ranked somewhere near Christmas in terms of special events. At 6 p.m., they started getting ready. Lily insisted on wearing her purple dress, the fancy one saved for important occasions. Ethan changed his shirt 4 times before settling on something that looked adult and put together without trying too hard. They took a cab to the university, arriving just after 6:30. The main plaza was already filling with people: students, faculty, community members. String lights had been hung between buildings. A jazz quartet played near the fountain. The whole campus had transformed into something festive. "This is so cool," Lily breathed, taking in the scene. Ethan held her hand tightly and tried to ignore the anxiety clawing up his throat. His drawings were inside that building, on display, where Clara would see them, where everyone would see them, where the careful distance he'd maintained would collapse completely. "Should we find Clara?" Lily asked. "Let's look around first." They wandered through the outdoor exhibits: a student poetry reading, a traditional dance performance, a display of scientific posters that Lily found inexplicably fascinating. Ethan kept checking his watch. The showcase officially started at 7. Clara's presentation was scheduled for 7:30, which meant people would start filtering into the humanities building right around now, which meant his drawings were being seen. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Clara. "Where are you? I'm about to go on soon." Nervous. He typed back, "Near the fountain." "You'll be great." Easy for you to say. You're not the one giving a boring lecture to people who showed up for free wine. They're lucky to hear you talk, even if it's about boring stuff. "I'm going to remember you said my research is boring." I said, "You said it was boring. I think it's fascinating." Liar. "But thank you." Ethan smiled at his phone, then noticed Lily giving him that look again. The smiley look, according to her. "What?" he asked defensively. "Nothing." But she was grinning. At 7:15, they made their way toward the humanities building. Ethan's heart was trying to escape his chest. This was it. No going back. In a few minutes, Clara would walk into that corridor and see 8 illustrations that basically announced his feelings to anyone paying attention. Subtle, He was not. They entered through the main doors into controlled chaos. People everywhere, moving between different presentations and displays. A student directed them toward the corridor where the visual arts were displayed. Ethan's feet felt like lead. They turned the corner and there they were. His 8 illustrations, professionally mounted with perfect spacing and lighting. Small cards beside each one listed the title and artist's name. They looked good. Better than good. The lighting brought out details he'd worked on for hours. The progression from isolation to connection was clear even from a distance. And people were looking at them, actually stopping, studying, discussing them. A middle-aged woman stood in front of the bookstore piece, leaning close to examine the detail. 2 students were taking pictures of the reading chair illustration. A professor type gestured at the kitchen table scene while explaining something to his companion. "Daddy, they're beautiful," Lily whispered, squeezing his hand. Ethan couldn't speak, could barely breathe. He'd created things before, shown work publicly before, but never anything this personal. Never anything that felt like he'd taken his actual heart and pinned it to a wall for examination. Then Lily gasped, "There's Clara!" Ethan looked up and saw her at the far end of the corridor, talking to an older colleague. She wore a dark blue dress he'd never seen before, her hair pulled back in a way that emphasized her neck and shoulders. Professional, poised. The professor version of Clara he'd only glimpsed in passing. She hadn't seen the drawings yet, was too focused on her conversation, probably running through her presentation notes mentally. "Should we say hi?" Lily started pulling him forward. "Wait!" But Lily was already moving, dragging him along. They wove through the crowd. Clara caught sight of them and her face transformed, the professional mask dropping away, replaced by genuine delight. "You made it!" She gave Lily a quick hug, then smiled at Ethan. "I was worried you'd gotten lost." "Place is bigger than I expected," Ethan managed, his voice coming out roughly normal. "I know, it's chaos. My talk starts in 10 minutes and I've completely forgotten everything I planned to say." Clara glanced at her watch, then back at them. "Will you stay after? There's a reception with actual good food." "We'll be here," Ethan said. Clara squeezed his arm, the same brief touch she'd given him weeks ago outside the cafe, and headed toward the auditorium where her presentation would take place. She disappeared into the crowd, leaving Ethan standing in the corridor with his daughter and his exposed heart mounted on the wall. "Can we look at your drawings?" Lily asked. "You've already seen them at home." "But they look different here, all official." They moved closer to the display, joining the small crowd that had gathered. Ethan tried to see the pieces through fresh eyes, tried to imagine encountering them without context. The story was clear enough: isolation to connection, closed spaces to open ones, a life expanding beyond its previous boundaries. And there, in the final piece, was Clara's face, rendered with every ounce of skill Ethan possessed. Anyone looking at it could see this wasn't just a portrait. This was how someone looked at a person they... "Is that Clara?" Lily asked loudly. Several people turned to look at them. Ethan wanted to dissolve into the floor. "Yes. You made her really pretty. Because she is really pretty. Are you going to tell her you drew her? She's going to see it herself in about..." Ethan checked his watch. Clara's presentation was 20 minutes. Add 5 for questions. Another 5 for her to extract herself from academic small talk. 30 minutes. She's going to be so surprised. Surprised? Yes. Ethan was counting on surprised. He was hoping for pleased. He would settle for not horrified. What he wasn't prepared for was the possibility that Clara might see these drawings, might see that final portrait, and understand exactly what they meant. Might understand that somewhere between coffee collisions and bookstore afternoons, Ethan had fallen completely and irrevocably for his hallway neighbor. Might have to acknowledge feelings that were supposed to stay safely contained in graphite and paper. 29 minutes until his carefully controlled life became significantly more complicated. Ethan took Lily's hand and tried to breathe normally. The auditorium was packed, which surprised Ethan. He'd expected maybe 30 people for an academic talk about 19th century urban development. Instead, nearly every seat was filled with students, faculty, and community members actually interested in history. Or maybe just there for the free wine Clara had mentioned. They found seats near the back, Lily swung her legs and studied the program while Ethan studied his own racing thoughts. In a different room, people were looking at his drawings, making connections, maybe recognizing Clara from the portrait, maybe understanding what it meant that someone had spent weeks carefully rendering her face with that particular kind of attention. The department chair, a stern woman in her 60s, gave a brief introduction praising Clara's research and dedication. Then Clara stepped up to the podium and Ethan forgot to breathe. She'd transformed again. The nervous woman from earlier had vanished, replaced by someone confident and commanding. She spoke without notes, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium, making complex historical patterns sound like compelling storytelling. She talked about Paris during the Industrial Revolution, about workers flooding in from rural areas, tripling the population in 40 years, about how the city physically changed to accommodate them. New housing, new infrastructure, new social tensions. About how rapid growth created both opportunity and crisis. About how cities were living organisms that adapted or collapsed under pressure. Ethan found himself leaning forward, genuinely fascinated. This was Clara in her element, doing what she loved, brilliant and passionate and completely in control. And he was gone, completely gone. Whatever remaining defense he'd maintained against his feelings crumbled entirely. The presentation ended to enthusiastic applause. Clara fielded questions with ease. Her face flushed with the particular joy of talking about something she cared about to people actually listening. Afterward, people swarmed her. Students, colleagues, strangers wanting to discuss her research. Clara handled them all with grace, but Ethan could see the exhaustion beginning to show around her eyes. "Should we wait?" Lily asked. "Let's give her some space. We can find her after." They slipped out of the auditorium and back into the corridor. The crowd had thinned slightly, people moving toward the reception area where promised food awaited. But a cluster remained near Ethan's illustrations, and his stomach dropped when he realized why. Clara stood in front of them. She must have cut her post-presentation socializing short, must have been told about the art in the corridor, must have come to look. And now she was staring at 8 pieces that documented their developing relationship with uncomfortable clarity. Ethan watched from a distance as Clara moved slowly from one illustration to the next. Her expression was unreadable. She studied each piece carefully, leaning close to examine details, stepping back to take in the whole. When she reached the final portrait, her own face staring back at her, she went completely still. Ethan's heart was trying to break his ribs. Clara stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then she turned, scanning the corridor, clearly looking for someone. Looking for him. Their eyes met across the crowded space. And Ethan saw everything he needed to know in her expression. Surprise, yes, but also understanding, recognition, and something else, something that looked almost like wonder. She started walking toward him. Ethan's brain shut down completely. Lily squeezed his hand hard enough to hurt. Clara stopped in front of them, close enough that he could see the silver pendant at her throat rising and falling with her breathing. "You drew those," she said quietly. It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. "Yes." "All of them?" "All of them. The bookstore, the cafe, the what?" She trailed off, glancing back at the corridor, at the portrait. "Me. You." Lily looked between them like she was watching the world's most interesting tennis match. Clara's eyes were bright, swimming with emotions Ethan couldn't name. "How long have you been working on these?" 3 weeks? Since you mentioned the showcase." "You never said anything. It was supposed to be a surprise." "It's," Clara laughed, but it came out shaky. "It's the most surprising thing anyone's ever done for me." People were definitely watching them now. But Ethan didn't care, could only see Clara standing in front of him, looking at him like he'd given her something infinitely precious. "I remembered everything," he said, echoing the words she'd say later. Words he couldn't know yet, but felt true anyway. Artists tend to draw the things that matter. Clara's breath caught. "Ethan, I know this is complicated," he continued, words spilling out before courage failed. "I know I have a kid and responsibilities and a life that's barely held together most days. I know we're neighbors and that makes things weird, and I know you probably don't feel the same way, but I needed you to know I've been trying to stay sensible about this," Clara interrupted quietly. Ethan's heart sank. Right. Of course. I understand. Let me finish. She smiled, soft and devastating. I've been trying to stay sensible, telling myself you're just a friend, that you have enough complications without me adding more, that I should keep appropriate distance. That's probably smart, Ethan managed. Probably. Clara glanced down at Lily, who was watching with rapt attention. But then I saw those drawings, saw myself through your eyes, and I realized something. What? That staying sensible might be the stupidest thing I could do. The corridor, the people, the entire university seemed to fade into background noise. There was only Clara, looking at him with her heart in her eyes, saying words that rearranged his entire world. Daddy, Lily whispered urgently, tugging his sleeve. She likes you back. I can hear that, baby. So what are you going to do about it? Good question. Excellent question. Ethan looked at Clara, brilliant, kind, complicated Clara, who somehow saw something in his messy life worth wanting and found himself completely out of words. So he did the only thing that made sense. He reached for her hand. Clara's fingers threaded through his like they'd been designed to fit exactly that way. And in a university corridor surrounded by Ethan's exposed heart, rendered in graphite, in careful detail, with his daughter grinning beside them and strangers definitely noticing, two people who'd spent weeks circling each other finally stopped pretending they were just friends. This is going to be complicated, Clara said softly. Everything worthwhile is complicated. I don't know how to do this. Dating a single parent, being part of someone's established life. I don't know how to do this either, dating anyone, letting someone in. So we'll figure it out together? Ethan squeezed her hand, feeling the rightness of it settle into his bones. Together. Lily threw her arms around both their legs, nearly knocking them over. This is the best night ever. Can we get food now? I'm starving. Clara laughed, that full-body laugh Ethan had been sketching for weeks, and looked down at Lily. Food sounds perfect. They made their way to the reception together, hand in hand, while behind them Ethan's illustrations told the story they'd both been too scared to speak out loud. A story about coffee collisions and bookstore afternoons, about finding connection in unexpected places, about two lonely people learning to open doors they'd kept carefully locked, about an artist who remembered everything and a professor who finally let herself feel something beyond academic distance, about taking chances when every logical reason said not to. The night was far from over. There would be questions to answer, logistics to figure out, complications to navigate. But for now, in this moment, Ethan let himself feel something he hadn't felt in longer than he could remember. Hope. Pure, uncomplicated, terrifying hope. And standing beside him, holding his hand like she had no intention of letting go, Clara felt it too. The reception was held in a courtyard strung with lights that turned everything soft and golden. Long tables offered wine, cheese, fruit arrangements that were almost too pretty to disturb. A string quartet had replaced the jazz band, playing something classical that Ethan didn't recognize but found soothing anyway. Lily made a beeline for the dessert table with the single-minded focus of a child who'd spotted chocolate. Clara and Ethan followed at a more measured pace, still holding hands, both hyper-aware of the contact and unwilling to break it. I should probably circulate, Clara said, though she made no move to leave. Department politics, networking, all that academic theater. You don't sound enthusiastic. I'm not. I'd rather stay here with you. The simple honesty of it made Ethan's chest ache in the best way. Then stay. It's not that simple. The department chair is already giving me looks. If I don't at least make an appearance, Clara! A voice cut through the ambient noise. They turned to find an older man approaching. Silver hair, expensive suit, the particular confidence of someone used to being the most important person in any room. Wonderful presentation, though I still think you're underselling the economic factors in favor of the social narrative. Clara's hand tightened almost imperceptibly in Ethan's. Professor Morrison, thank you for coming. Wouldn't miss it. Morrison's gaze slid to Ethan, then to their joined hands, his expression cooling slightly. I don't believe we've met. Ethan Caldwell, Ethan said, offering his free hand. Friend of Clara's. Morrison's handshake was brief and perfunctory. The artist. I saw your work in the corridor, quite personal. There was a weight to the word that made it clear Morrison had understood exactly what those drawings meant. Ethan fought the urge to pull his hand back from Clara's, to create distance, to make this easier for her professionally, but Clara held on tighter. Ethan's incredibly talented, she said evenly. The pieces are beautiful. Indeed. Morrison turned his attention back to Clara. I wanted to discuss your paper for the spring conference. Have you considered expanding the scope to include comparative analysis with American urbanization? It could strengthen your argument considerably. And just like that, Ethan became invisible. Morrison and Clara slipped into academic speak, methodology and primary sources and theoretical frameworks. Ethan understood maybe one word in 5. This was Clara's world, the one she inhabited when she wasn't coloring with Lily or sitting in cafes talking about nothing important. This version of her spoke a different language, moved with different purpose. For the first time since the corridor, doubt crept in. What was he thinking? He was a freelance illustrator who could barely make rent. She was a university professor with a PhD and colleagues who wore suits that probably cost more than his monthly grocery budget. They existed in different universes that happened to share a hallway. I'll let you talk, Ethan said quietly when Morrison paused for breath. I should check on Lily anyway. Clara's eyes snapped to his, alarm flickering across her face. Wait. It's fine. Really. Do your professor thing. He gently extracted his hand from hers, immediately feeling the loss. I'll be around. He walked away before she could protest, weaving through clusters of people engaged in conversations about things he didn't understand. Found Lily at the dessert table, chocolate already smeared across her face, talking to a graduate student about whether sprinkles counted as a food group. Daddy! Lily grabbed his hand with her non-chocolate one. This is Marcus. He says sprinkles are just decorative, but I think they're essential. Tell him I'm right. Sprinkles are absolutely essential, Ethan agreed solemnly. Marcus laughed. I stand corrected. Can't argue with that logic. They chatted for a few minutes, easy, meaningless conversation that required no mental effort. Marcus was getting his doctorate in something related to medieval trade routes. He'd seen Ethan's illustrations and genuinely liked them, asked thoughtful questions about technique and process. Normal interaction. Comfortable. But Ethan kept glancing toward where he'd left Clara, watching her navigate the academic crowd with practiced ease. She looked at home there, like she belonged. She keeps looking over here, you know, Marcus said quietly, following Ethan's gaze. What? Your girlfriend. She's looked this direction about 6 times in the last 2 minutes. Pretty sure she's trying to extract herself without being rude. She's not my girlfriend. Marcus raised an eyebrow. The hand-holding and the portrait that basically screams, I'm in love with this woman, suggests otherwise. Heat flooded Ethan's face. It's complicated. Good things usually are. Marcus grabbed another cookie from the table. For what it's worth, I've known Professor Whitmore for 3 years. Never seen her look at anyone the way she looks at you. Before Ethan could process that, Clara appeared at his elbow, slightly breathless. Sorry. Morrison trapped me in a discussion about archival research methods. I tried to signal you, but... She noticed Marcus and smiled. Hi, Marcus. Thanks for the essay revision. Much better. Glad it worked. Marcus gave them both a knowing look and drifted away, leaving them in a small bubble of semi-privacy. Clara immediately took Ethan's hand again, threading their fingers together like she needed the contact. You okay? Fine. Why wouldn't I be? Because you got that look. What look? The one that says you're overthinking something and convincing yourself it's a problem. Clara studied his face with those 2 perceptive eyes. Talk to me. Ethan glanced around the courtyard, at the professors and students, the academic achievement on display, the world Clara inhabited with such confidence. I don't fit here. Here specifically or here with me? Both? I don't know. He struggled to articulate the doubt gnawing at him. You have this whole life, important work, colleagues who speak in theories and frameworks, and I draw pictures for children's books. You create art that makes people feel things, Clara corrected gently. There's nothing lesser about that. Your colleague looked at me like I was a stray you'd brought to a formal dinner. Morrison looks at everyone like that. He's professionally condescending. She squeezed his hand. Ethan, if you're worried about fitting into my academic world, don't be, because honestly, I'm terrible at it. He blinked. You gave a presentation to a packed auditorium. You clearly belong. I can perform, Clara interrupted. I can put on the professor costume and speak the language. But it's exhausting. Half the people here only care about climbing hierarchies and publishing in the right journals. They'd discuss paint drying if it advanced their careers. That sounds cynical. It's realistic. Clara pulled him slightly away from the crowd, toward a quieter corner near a stone fountain. You want to know why I left that book outside your door? Why? Because I'd been watching you for months. Every morning I'd see you leaving with Lily, looking exhausted but trying so hard. And I kept thinking about how you were actually doing something that mattered. Raising a kid, creating things, living a real life instead of just pursuing abstract achievements. My life is a mess, Ethan said flatly. Your life is full. There's a difference. Clara's eyes were bright in the string lights. Do you know what I did last Saturday before we went to the bookstore? What? I graded papers for 6 hours. Then I meal prepped tasteless chicken and vegetables for the week. Then I read journal articles until my eyes hurt. And I went to bed thinking that was a productive day. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. That's been every Saturday for 2 years, productive and empty. And now? Now I go to bookstores and read to a 6-year-old who thinks purple octopuses are scientifically valid. I sit in cafes talking about nothing important with someone who actually listens. I feel like I'm living moments instead of just documenting them for future publication. Ethan stared at her, something shifting in his understanding. You're saying I saved you from boring Saturdays? I'm saying you reminded me what it feels like to be present in my own life. Clara moved closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something light and floral. So if you're worried about not fitting into my world, maybe consider that I don't particularly want the world I've been inhabiting. Maybe I want something different. Different like what? Different like this. She gestured between them. Like hand-holding at university events and drawings that make my chest hurt, and a little girl who thinks I do the best funny voices. Lily does love your funny voices. I know, she told me, in detail. They stood there in their quiet corner while the reception continued around them, and Ethan felt the doubt begin to loosen its grip. Maybe this wasn't about fitting into each other's worlds. Maybe it was about building something new together. I'm still scared, he admitted. Of what? Screwing this up, letting you down, discovering I'm not what you need. Ethan? Clara cupped his face with her free hand, her palm warm against his cheek. I'm terrified too. I don't know how to date someone with a kid. I don't know how to be part of an established life. I'll probably mess up 1,000 times. That's not reassuring. But I want to try anyway, don't you? Did he? Ethan thought about the past month, about how his world had expanded from the narrow confines of survival into something richer, about sketching again, laughing again, feeling things beyond exhaustion and worry. About Lily asking when Clara could come over again, like she was already family. About standing in a corridor earlier tonight, watching Clara's face when she saw those drawings, seeing himself reflected in her eyes as someone worth wanting. Yes, he said, I want to try. Clara's smile could have powered the entire city. She leaned in, and for a heart-stopping moment, Ethan thought she might kiss him. But then Lily's voice cut through the moment. Daddy! Clara! They have a chocolate fountain! An actual fountain made of chocolate! We have to investigate immediately! They broke apart, laughing, and let Lily drag them toward the dessert table where a modest chocolate fountain was indeed flowing. Lily's enthusiasm was infectious, and soon they were surrounded by other kids who'd discovered the chocolate situation. Ethan found himself talking to other parents, comparing notes on schools, commiserating about bedtimes, the universal language of people raising small humans. Clara chatted with students who approached to thank her for the presentation, and through it all, they kept finding their way back to each other. A touch on the arm, a shared glance. Small moments of connection threaded through the evening. Around 9 o'clock, Lily started yawning despite the chocolate-fueled energy boost. I'm not tired, she insisted, yawning again. Clearly, Ethan said, scooping her up. She immediately rested her head on his shoulder, already half asleep. Clara smiled at the sight. Should I call you a cab? Probably smart. It's past someone's bedtime. I don't have a bedtime, Lily mumbled into his shoulder. Bedtimes are for babies. You're right, my mistake. Clara pulled out her phone and ordered a ride while Ethan said goodbye to the few people he'd actually talked to. Marcus gave him a knowing thumbs up. A couple of professors complimented his artwork. The department chair nodded coldly, and Clara whispered that he should consider that a victory. Outside, the night had turned crisp and clear. Stars were actually visible beyond the city lights. They waited on the steps while Lily dozed against Ethan's shoulder, her purple dress already smudged with chocolate evidence. Thank you for coming tonight, Clara said softly. For the drawings. For being brave when I was too scared to be. I think we were both pretty brave. Maybe. She leaned against his free side, careful not to disturb Lily. What happens now? Now I take this one home and spend 20 minutes convincing her to brush her teeth. I meant with us. Ethan shifted Lily's weight slightly, thinking. I guess we figure it out as we go. Take it slow, see what works. Slow sounds good, Clara paused. Though I should probably tell you something. What? I don't really do slow very well. When I want something, I tend to commit completely. It's a character flaw. That doesn't sound like a flaw. It is when what I want is complicated. When there's a kid involved who deserves stability. When rushing could hurt people I care about. The admission hung between them, heavy with meaning. Clara cared about them. Both of them. Enough to worry about doing this right. Then we'll go at whatever speed feels right, Ethan said. No pressure, no expectations, just us figuring it out. Us, Clara repeated, testing the word. I like the sound of that. The cab arrived, cutting short whatever Ethan might have said next. Clara helped him settle Lily in the back seat, still mostly asleep, clutching a bag of leftover cookies like treasure. Before Ethan could climb in after her, Clara caught his hand. Can I see you tomorrow? Both of you? We usually do laundry on Saturdays. I love laundry. You're a terrible liar. Okay, I hate laundry, but I'd like to spend time with you anyway. Ethan found himself smiling despite the exhaustion creeping in. Lunch? There's a place Lily loves, makes these grilled cheese sandwiches that are basically art. Perfect. Text me the address? Will do. Clara leaned in and kissed his cheek, brief and soft and full of promise. Good night, Ethan. Good night. He climbed into the cab, and as they pulled away, he looked back to see Clara still standing on the steps, watching them go, wrapped in her coat against the night chill. Lily stirred against him. Is Clara your girlfriend now? I don't know, baby. Maybe. Is that okay? It's extremely okay. She makes you smile more. She does, doesn't she? And she's nice to me. Very nice to you. And she's pretty. Very pretty. Lily snuggled closer. I think she should be your girlfriend. I think we should keep her. Ethan pressed a kiss to the top of her head, feeling something settle in his chest. Keep her. Like Clara was a stray they'd found and decided to love. In a way, maybe that wasn't far from the truth. I think we should keep her too, he whispered, but Lily was already asleep, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts and the passing city lights and the feeling that his life had just fundamentally changed direction. The next morning arrived with bright sunshine that seemed personally offensive given how little sleep Ethan had gotten. Lily woke him at 7 a.m. by jumping on his stomach. It's Saturday, she announced, like he might have forgotten which day it was. We're seeing Clara today. We're seeing Clara this afternoon. It's morning. Morning is part of today. Hard to argue with that logic when his brain was still mostly asleep. Ethan stumbled through the morning routine, breakfast, cartoons, the laundry he'd mentioned to Clara, except he couldn't focus on any of it because he kept replaying last night in his head. The drawings on the wall, Clara's face when she saw them, the conversation in the courtyard, the feeling of her hand in his. Had that actually happened? Or had he imagined the whole thing in some sleep-deprived hallucination? His phone buzzed around 10. A text from Clara. Morning. Still on for lunch? Or did you wake up and realize last night was a terrible idea? Ethan smiled at his phone. Still on. Lily's been awake for 3 hours planning outfit changes. Smart kid. I'm on my 4th shirt. You're also changing shirts nervously? I contain multitudes. Also anxiety. Me too. We're a mess, perfect for each other then. There was a pause before Clara's next message appeared. Yeah, we really are. Ethan stared at those words, feeling something warm and terrifying expand in his chest. This was really happening. They were really doing this. Around 11, someone knocked on his door. Ethan opened it to find Clara standing in the hallway, holding a box of donuts. I know we're having lunch later, she said quickly, but I was awake at 6 and anxious, and the donut place was open. And I thought maybe Lily would like them, and I probably should have texted first instead of just showing up, but Ethan pulled her inside and kissed her. It wasn't planned, wasn't smooth, just a quick press of lips that tasted like sugar and coffee and felt exactly right. Clara made a small surprised sound against his mouth, then melted into it, her free hand coming up to curl in his shirt. When they broke apart, both slightly breathless, Lily was standing in the doorway to her room with the biggest grin imaginable. You kissed, she announced. I saw it. That means you're definitely boyfriend and girlfriend now. Lily, Ethan started. Those are the rules, Daddy. Everyone knows. Clara laughed, still close enough that Ethan could feel it. Can't argue with established rules. See? Clara agrees. Lily approached and peered into the donut box. Are those for me? For all of us, Clara said, but you can pick first. Lily selected a chocolate donut with rainbow sprinkles, essential, not decorative, and carried it carefully to the kitchen table. Clara and Ethan followed, neither quite willing to move too far apart yet. They ate donuts and talked about nothing important. Lily demonstrated her ability to get chocolate on every visible surface. Clara told a story about a student who'd shown up to an exam dressed as Napoleon Bonaparte for historical immersion. Ethan described his ongoing war with the aspirational bunny. Normal morning conversation. Except nothing felt normal because Clara was here, in his apartment, on a Saturday morning, like she belonged in this space, like she was already part of their routine. Around noon, they left for lunch. The restaurant was a tiny place 3 blocks away that specialized in creative grilled cheese combinations. Lily ordered her usual, the classic but make it fancy, while Clara and Ethan shared something with apple slices and brie that shouldn't have worked but absolutely did. I have an idea, Clara said partway through the meal, and you can absolutely say no. Okay, Ethan said cautiously. What if we collaborated on something? A project that combines my research with your illustrations. Ethan set down his sandwich. What kind of project? Stories of cities told through art and memory. I have all this research about how urban spaces evolved, how they shaped people's lives, and you have the ability to visualize those spaces, make them feel real and immediate. Like a book? Maybe. Or an exhibition, or both. Clara's eyes were bright with enthusiasm. We could tell stories about Montreval specifically, its history as a river trading post, how it grew during industrialization, the immigrant communities that shaped it. Make it personal and historical at the same time. Lily looked up from her sandwich. Will there be pictures of the bookstore? Definitely pictures of the bookstore, Clara confirmed. Then it's a good idea. Ethan's mind was already spinning with possibilities. The river at different time periods. The old buildings downtown and what they used to be. Immigration patterns visualized through family stories. That could actually work, he said slowly. You sound surprised. I am. Usually when people suggest collaborations, it's code for do free work for exposure. This would be real, funded if we can get a grant, published if we do it right. Clara leaned forward, excited now. I've been thinking about doing public-facing work for a while. Something that matters beyond academic journals that 12 people read. And your drawings last night made me realize what that could look like. Can I think about it? Of course. No pressure, just an idea. But Ethan was already hooked. The concept of combining his art with meaningful historical narrative, creating something that mattered beyond client work and commercial projects, working closely with Clara on something they both cared about. Actually, he said, I don't need to think about it. I'm in. Clara's smile was radiant. Yeah? Yeah, let's make something together. They spent the rest of lunch brainstorming, historical periods to cover, visual styles that might work, potential venues for exhibition. Lily contributed ideas that ranged from brilliant to completely absurd, and they wrote down all of them because why not? Walking home afterward, Lily between them holding both their hands, Ethan felt something click into place. This was what the future could look like. Not just dating, not just figuring out logistics, but building something meaningful together. Creating partnership from shared passion, making a life instead of just surviving one. Back at the building, they paused in the hallway outside their respective apartments. Lily had already disappeared inside Ethan's apartment, announcing she needed to draw pictures for the project immediately. "Thank you for today," Clara said. "For the donuts and the kiss and saying yes to the book. Thank you for showing up with donuts and for being brave enough to kiss me back. It wasn't that brave. I've wanted to kiss you for weeks." "Weeks?" "Since the bookstore, probably. Maybe earlier." Clara leaned against her door, studying him. "I'm not good at this. At letting people in. At admitting I want things. You're doing pretty well so far. That's because you make it easy. You and Lily both." She reached for his hand, threading their fingers together. "I know we said slow, but I need you to know something." "What?" "This isn't casual for me. I don't do casual well. If we're doing this, I'm all in." The honesty in her voice made Ethan's throat tight. "I'm all in too. Have been since before I understood what was happening." "So we're really doing this? Dating? Being together? Figuring out how to merge our lives?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "We're really doing this." Clara pulled him closer and kissed him again. Longer this time, deeper, full of promise and want, and the beginning of something that felt inevitable. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I should let you go," Clara whispered. "You have a kid who's probably drawing on your walls right now." "She's absolutely drawing on my walls. But I don't want to let you go." "Then don't, not yet." They stood there in the hallway holding each other, neither quite ready to return to separate apartments. And Ethan thought about how 8 months ago he'd arrived in this building feeling like his life was ending. How he'd reduced existence to survival and deadlines and getting through each day. How wrong he'd been. Because standing here with Clara in his arms, with Lily singing inside his apartment, and a collaborative project to plan, and a future that suddenly looked less like repetitive survival and more like actual living, Ethan realized something profound. His life hadn't ended 8 months ago. It had been waiting to begin. Sometimes the best chapters don't start with grand plans or perfect timing. Sometimes they start with spilled coffee and scattered papers, and people brave enough to say yes to possibility. Sometimes they start in quiet hallways where two lonely people finally stop being lonely together. And sometimes that's exactly enough. Clara didn't leave the hallway for another 20 minutes. They stood there holding each other, talking in quiet voices about everything and nothing, until Lily appeared in the doorway covered in marker stains. "Daddy, I finished my drawing for the book project, but I accidentally colored on my arm and it won't come off, and also I might have gotten some on the couch a little bit." "How much is a little bit?" Ethan asked, reluctantly stepping back from Clara. "Like a medium amount?" Clara laughed. "I should let you handle that situation. But tomorrow, Sunday? We usually go to the park if the weather's good. Can I join? You want to spend your Sunday at a playground?" "I want to spend my Sunday with you," Clara corrected. "The playground is just geography." Ethan felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. "Then yes, absolutely yes." They said goodbye with one more kiss that Lily definitely witnessed and would definitely tell everyone about. Then Clara disappeared into her apartment and Ethan turned to face the marker situation, which turned out to be more extensive than medium suggested. But he found himself smiling while he cleaned purple marker off the couch cushions. Found himself humming while he helped Lily wash the stains off her arms. Found himself feeling lighter than he had in years. That evening, after Lily was in bed, Ethan sat at his kitchen table with his sketchbook open. But instead of drawing, he pulled out his phone and called a number he'd been avoiding for weeks. His mother answered on the third ring. "Ethan, is everything okay? Is Lily—" "We're fine, Mom. Everyone's fine." "Oh, thank goodness. You never call this late unless something's wrong." "It's 8:30. "Exactly. Late." He could hear the smile in her voice. "What's going on, sweetheart?" Ethan looked around his small apartment, the drawings taped to the refrigerator, Lily's toys scattered across the floor, the life he'd built from nothing but determination and fear. "I think I'm dating someone." Silence. Then, You think you're dating someone? You're not sure? No, I'm sure. I'm definitely dating someone. Her name is Clara. She lives across the hall. She's a history professor and she's kind and brilliant and Lily loves her and I. He stopped, the words catching in his throat. You love her too, his mother finished gently. I barely know her. We've only been, whatever this is, for like 2 days officially. Your father proposed to me after 3 weeks. Sometimes you just know. That's terrifying. Love usually is. His mother's voice softened. Tell me about her. So Ethan did. Told her about the coffee collision, the bookstore, the drawings, about how Clara made him want to create again, about how she fit into their life like she'd always been there, about the book project and the future that suddenly looked less like survival and more like possibility. His mother listened without interrupting, the way she'd always listened when he needed to work through something out loud. You sound happy, she said when he finished. I am, terrified, but happy. Good. You deserve both those things. She paused. Can I say something that might be hard to hear? When has that ever stopped you? When you left Philadelphia, I was worried you were running away from your life instead of towards something better. The observation landed heavily. I needed a fresh start. I know, and you've built something good in Montreval. You're an amazing father, and Lily is thriving, and you should be proud of that. His mother's voice grew firmer. But sweetheart, you've been so focused on proving you can do it alone that you forgot it's okay to not be alone. I haven't been alone. I have Lily. That's not what I mean, and you know it. She sighed. Let this woman in. Let yourself have more than just survival. You're allowed to be happy. After they hung up, Ethan sat in the quiet apartment thinking about his mother's words. For 8 months, he'd worn his independence like armor. Proved he could handle single parenthood, freelance chaos, starting over in a strange city. Proved he didn't need anyone's help. But maybe proving something wasn't the same as living well. Maybe letting Clara in wasn't weakness. Maybe it was the bravest thing he could do. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that made Montreval look like a postcard. Clear skies, crisp air, leaves turning gold and red along the riverside. Ethan packed a picnic lunch while Lily changed her outfit 3 times, determined to look park appropriate. Clara knocked on their door at exactly 10 o'clock, holding a soccer ball. I don't know if Lily likes soccer, she said, but I saw this at the store and thought maybe we could kick it around. Or not. We can just swing. Whatever she wants. Clara brought a soccer ball, Lily shrieked, abandoning her 4th outfit change to investigate. I love soccer. Emma's brother plays soccer, and one time he let me kick the ball, and it went really far, and everyone said I was good. Then soccer it is, Clara said, grinning. They walked to the park together, Lily skipping ahead with the ball while Ethan and Clara followed at a more reasonable pace. The city was alive with weekend energy. Families out enjoying the weather, joggers on the riverside path, street musicians playing for spare change. I barely slept last night, Clara admitted quietly. Nervous? Excited. Nervous. Both. She bumped her shoulder against his. I kept thinking about the book project, started outlining possible chapters, made lists of historical sources we could use. Very romantic Sunday morning thoughts. I did the same thing, sketched possible visual themes until 2 a.m. We're both disasters. Perfect for each other, remember? Clara laughed and took his hand, and they walked the rest of the way like that, fingers intertwined, comfortable silence between them. The park was crowded with the weekend rush, kids everywhere, parents claiming benches, dogs chasing frisbees. Lily immediately dragged Clara toward an open patch of grass to practice soccer, while Ethan spread out a blanket and watched them. Clara was terrible at soccer, completely, hilariously terrible. She kicked the ball in the wrong direction more often than the right one, tripped over her own feet, missed passes by comical margins. But she laughed through all of it, didn't get frustrated or self-conscious, just kept trying while Lily offered increasingly detailed coaching advice. You have to use the inside of your foot, Clara, not your toe. I'm using the inside of my foot. No, you're not. You're using the middle. There are too many parts of the foot to keep track of. Ethan pulled out his sketchbook and started drawing, quick gesture sketches capturing movement and joy. Clara's face when she actually connected with the ball properly, Lily's delighted expression when Clara fell dramatically onto the grass after a missed kick. This was what he'd been missing, not just in the past 8 months, but longer. Years, maybe. The simple pleasure of watching people he cared about be happy, of documenting moments instead of deadlines, of creating art that mattered because it captured something real. After an hour of soccer, Lily declared she was probably dying of starvation, so they spread out the picnic lunch. Sandwiches, fruit, the good cookies Ethan splurged on. They ate while Lily provided detailed commentary on every dog that passed by. That one's a golden retriever. They're friendly, but they drool a lot. That one's probably a mix. Emma's cousin has a mix, and he can do tricks. That one looks like a cloud with legs. Clara was stretched out on the blanket, her head propped on one hand, watching Lily with open affection. And Ethan realized with sudden clarity that this was what he'd been afraid of. Not that Clara wouldn't fit into their life, but that she would fit perfectly, and then something would go wrong and Lily would lose another person she loved. That he would lose another person he loved. "You're thinking too loud," Clara said softly, not taking her eyes off Lily. "How do you know I'm thinking?" "You get this look, like you're solving complex math problems in your head." "I'm just watching." "Liar." Clara sat up and met his eyes. "Talk to me." Ethan glanced at Lily, who'd moved on to examining interesting rocks. "What if this doesn't work?" "Then it doesn't work. That's not comforting. It's not supposed to be comforting. It's supposed to be honest." Clara reached for his hand. "I can't promise this will work out perfectly. I can't promise I won't screw up or that we won't hit complications or that everything will be easy. Again, not comforting. But I can promise I'll try. I can promise that if we hit problems, I'll work through them instead of running. I can promise that I care about you and Lily enough to fight for this." She squeezed his hand. "Can you promise me the same?" Could he? Ethan thought about his history of leaving when things got hard. Philadelphia. Lily's mother. Every relationship he'd had that required real vulnerability. He'd always found an exit before anyone could hurt him too badly. But sitting here with Clara's hand in his and Lily humming nearby and the autumn sun warm on his face, Ethan realized he didn't want an exit anymore. "I promise," he said. "I'm scared, but I promise." "Good. Then we'll be scared together." They spent the rest of the afternoon at the park, played more soccer, pushed Lily on the swings until her legs pumped high enough to make Ethan nervous, built an elaborate stick castle that collapsed immediately. Normal Sunday things that felt extraordinary because they were doing them together. As the sun started sinking toward the river, painting everything gold, they packed up and headed home. Lily was tired enough to be quiet, holding both their hands, swinging between them every few steps. "Can Clara have dinner with us?" Lily asked as they approached their building. "If she wants to," Ethan said. "But she might have other plans." "I have no other plans," Clara said quickly. "Dinner sounds perfect." Back at the apartment, Ethan surveyed his refrigerator's limited options and decided on pasta. Again, Clara helped while Lily set the table with meticulous care, folding napkins into triangles and arranging utensils with precise spacing. "She's very particular about table settings," Ethan explained as Clara chopped vegetables. "I see that. Should I be worried about my fork placement?" "Extremely worried. She has standards." They cooked together in the small kitchen, working around each other with surprising ease. Clara told a story about a student who'd submitted a paper arguing that the French Revolution was caused by a bread shortage and nothing else. Ethan described his ongoing battle with a client who wanted a friendly T-Rex despite all evidence that T-Rex was not particularly friendly. Easy conversation, comfortable rhythm, like they'd been doing this for years instead of hours. Over dinner, Lily announced that she'd decided what she wanted to be when she grew up. "What's that, baby?" Ethan asked. "A history artist." Clara and Ethan exchanged glances. "A history artist?" Clara repeated. "Yeah, I'll draw pictures of old stuff and tell stories about it, like you and Daddy are doing with the book." "That's a brilliant idea," Clara said seriously. "I know. I'm very smart." "Extremely smart," Ethan agreed. After dinner, Lily wanted to show Clara her room, which meant showing Clara every single toy, book, and drawing in great detail. Ethan cleaned up the kitchen and listened to their voices through the thin walls, Clara asking questions about Lily's stuffed elephant, about the drawings taped to the walls, about the rock collection on the windowsill. Engaging with Lily's 6-year-old logic like it was the most important conversation she'd ever had. When they emerged an hour later, Lily was yawning despite her insistence that she was not even a little bit tired. Ethan started the bedtime routine, pajamas, teeth, 3 stories minimum, but Lily had a special request. "Can Clara read tonight?" Ethan looked at Clara, giving her an out. This was big. Bedtime stories were sacred territory, and inviting Clara into it meant something, but Clara's eyes were bright. "I'd love to." So they all piled into Lily's small bed, Lily in the middle, Ethan and Clara on either side, and Clara read 3 books in her best funny voices. Lily giggled at all the right parts, asked questions that derailed the narrative, and slowly grew heavier against Clara's side as sleep claimed her. When Lily's breathing deepened into sleep, Clara carefully closed the last book and looked at Ethan across their daughter's sleeping form. Our daughter, he thought, and the possessive pronoun felt natural instead of presumptuous. They extracted themselves carefully and tiptoed out of the room, leaving the door cracked and the nightlight on. In the living room, they collapsed onto the couch together, exhausted and content. "Thank you for today," Clara said, curling into his side. "For letting me be part of this. Thank you for wanting to be part of it. I really do, want this. You and Lily and Sunday afternoons at the park and terrible soccer skills and bedtime stories. Even the complicated parts? Especially the complicated parts. Those are usually the most meaningful." Ethan kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. "I think I'm falling in love with you, just so you know." Clara went very still. Then she tilted her head up to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "You think?" "No, I know. I'm definitely falling in love with you. Might already be there, actually." "That's fast. I know. We've only been officially together for 2 days." "I know that too. Normal people wait longer before saying things like that." "Are we normal people?" Clara laughed, soft and wondering. "No, we're really not." She reached up and cupped his face. "I'm falling in love with you too. Both of you. Have been for weeks probably. Maybe since the bookstore, maybe earlier." "That's also fast. Guess we're both disasters." "Perfect for each other," Ethan repeated, and kissed her. They stayed on the couch for hours after that, talking about the book project. Clara pulled up research notes on her phone while Ethan sketched possible visual themes. They debated historical accuracy versus artistic interpretation, discussed which stories would resonate most, planned timelines and outlines, work conversation that felt like foreplay because they were building something together, creating from shared passion. Around 11, Clara finally admitted she should probably go home. "I have an early seminar tomorrow, and if I stay much longer, I'm going to fall asleep on your couch." "You could stay," Ethan heard himself say. Clara went still. "Stay? Not like that. I just meant—" He fumbled for words. "The couch is comfortable. Or you could take my bed and I'll take the couch. I just meant you don't have to go if you don't want to." "Ethan Caldwell, are you asking me to have a sleepover?" "I'm asking you to stay, however that looks." Clara studied him for a long moment, then made a decision. "Okay, but I'm taking the couch. You need actual sleep." "I'm not letting you sleep on the couch." "Then I guess we're both sleeping on the couch." Which is how they ended up tangled together on Ethan's slightly too small couch, sharing a blanket, talking in whispers so they wouldn't wake Lily. Clara's head on his chest, his hand in her hair, both of them too wired with possibility to sleep. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Clara whispered. "Like what?" "I don't know. Something real." Ethan thought about it. "Sometimes I feel like I'm failing Lily, like I'm not enough. Like she deserves a mother and stability and a father who isn't always exhausted and stressed about money. That's not failure. That's being human. It feels like failure. You know what I see when I look at you two?" Clara shifted to meet his eyes. "I see a kid who's confident and kind and knows she's loved unconditionally. That doesn't happen by accident. That's you doing everything right even when it feels like you're barely holding it together. You're biased. I'm observant. There's a difference." "Your turn," Ethan said. "Tell me something you've never told anyone." Clara was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. Then, I've spent my entire adult life trying to prove I was smart enough, accomplished enough, important enough. Published papers, earned degrees, climbed the academic ladder. And somewhere in all that proving, I forgot to actually live. You're living now. Because of you. Because you reminded me what that looks like. She traced patterns on his chest. I was so lonely before you. Didn't even realize how lonely until suddenly I wasn't anymore. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other on the too small couch, while Montreval's city lights filtered through the windows and painted everything soft. Ethan woke to Lily's face inches from his own. Clara's still here, she whispered loudly. She slept on the couch with you. Does that mean she's staying forever? It means she fell asleep, Ethan whispered back, aware of Clara stirring against him. But is she staying forever? That's not how things work, baby. It should be how things work. Lily climbed onto the couch, squishing between them. I like when Clara's here. It feels like we're a real family. We are a real family, just you and me. I know, but with Clara it's like more family, extra family. Lily looked at him with those two wise eyes. Don't you want extra family? Clara made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been crying. Her eyes were still closed, but she was definitely awake, definitely listening. Yeah, baby, Ethan said quietly. I want extra family. Good. Then Clara should stay. It's not that simple. Why not? Because Clara has her own apartment and her own life, and we can't just decide she lives here now. Lily considered this. What if we asked nicely? Clara's eyes opened then, bright with tears and laughter. You know I can hear you, right? Lily grinned. I know, I was talking loud on purpose so you'd hear. She turned to Clara with complete seriousness. Do you want to be extra family? Lily, Ethan started, but Clara cut him off. Yeah, she said, her voice rough with emotion. I really, really want to be extra family. See, Daddy? She wants to stay. That's not what she said. It's kind of what I said, Clara admitted. They spent the morning in comfortable chaos. Clara borrowed clothes for her seminar, Ethan's shirt and her jeans from yesterday, which shouldn't have worked but somehow did. They made breakfast together while Lily provided detailed commentary on proper pancake technique. Then Clara left for campus with promises to return that evening, and Ethan got Lily ready for school. In the elevator, Lily announced, I think Clara should move in. We've been dating for 3 days. So, time is made up anyway. Mrs. Patterson said so. I don't think that's what Mrs. Patterson meant. She said time is a human construct for understanding the world. Okay, yes, technically. So 3 days or 3 years doesn't matter if it feels right. Ethan stared at his 6-year-old daughter, who apparently understood relationships better than he did. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just started listening. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged that felt less like dating and more like merging lives. Clara started keeping a toothbrush at Ethan's apartment. Ethan kept spare clothes at Clara's place for the mornings when he slept over after Lily was asleep, and his mother watched her via video call from Philadelphia. They worked on the book project in stolen hours, spreading research notes and sketches across kitchen tables. The illustrations came together slowly, carefully. Ethan drew Montreval at different historical moments. The original trading post along the river, the industrial boom of the 1800s, immigrant communities building new lives. Clara wrote accompanying text that made history feel immediate and human. They worked well together. Clara would get stuck on how to explain something and Ethan would sketch it, the visual making the concept clear. Ethan would struggle with historical accuracy, and Clara would pull up primary sources, anchoring his imagination in reality. Creating became collaborative instead of solitary, and somehow that made it better. 6 weeks after the university showcase, they submitted a grant proposal for the book project. 2 weeks later, they got the funding. Enough for a proper publication, an exhibition, even a small stipend. Clara screamed when she read the email. Ethan picked her up and spun her around his apartment while Lily demanded to know what was happening. We got the grant, Clara said, breathless with joy. We're making the book. I knew you would, Lily said matter-of-factly. You're both really good at your jobs. That evening they celebrated at Rosie's Cafe, the place where so much had started. Lily ordered hot chocolate with excessive whipped cream. Claire and Ethan shared a bottle of wine that was slightly too expensive, but worth it. I can't believe this is real, Clara said, her hand wrapped around Ethan's on the table. 6 months ago, I was grading papers alone in my apartment, thinking this was all my life would ever be. And now you're making books with a single dad and his precocious daughter? Now I'm building a life with people I love. She said it simply, like it was obvious, like love was just a fact instead of something terrifying and precious. Lily had chocolate all over her face, but was smiling so wide it looked painful. Can I help with the book? Absolutely, Clara said. We need a consultant on what kids would find interesting. I'm excellent at that. I'm a kid, so I'm an expert. They walked home through Montreval's evening streets, past the bookstore where this had really started, past the park where they'd played terrible soccer, past all the places that had become significant through repetition and love. At the building, Mrs. Chen from downstairs stopped them. You three make such a lovely family, she said in her careful English. Family. The words settled over them like a blessing. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan and Clara sat on his couch working on the book. But Ethan kept getting distracted, watching Clara bite her lip while she concentrated, the way her hair fell forward when she leaned over her laptop. I can feel you staring, Clara said without looking up. Can't help it. You're distracting. I'm literally reading a census report from 1847. Somehow making that attractive too. Clara closed her laptop and turned to face him. I need to tell you something. Ethan's stomach dropped. Okay. My lease is up in 2 months. Okay, he repeated, not sure where this was going. And I've been thinking about what to do, whether to renew or look for something different. Makes sense. Ethan, Clara took his hands. I want to move in here, with you and Lily, if you'll have me. The words hung in the air between them. 2 months ago, this would have terrified him, would have felt too fast, too complicated, too risky. But sitting here with Clara's hands in his and Lily sleeping safely down the hall, and a book project they were building together, it felt exactly right. Are you sure? He asked. This place is tiny. You'd be giving up your space, your privacy. I'd be gaining a family, real partnership, a life that feels like living instead of just existing. Clara's eyes were bright. I'm sure. I've been sure for weeks. I just didn't know how to ask. You don't have to ask? Yes, absolutely yes. Clara kissed him then, soft and deep and full of promise. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she was crying. Happy tears, she assured him, just overwhelmed. Me too. They stayed up late that night making plans. Clara would move her stuff gradually. They'd reorganize to make space. Lily would be thrilled. It wasn't practical or sensible by conventional standards, but nothing about their relationship had been conventional, and that was exactly what made it work. 2 months later, Clara officially moved in. Her books filled the shelves Ethan installed. Her clothes invaded his closet. Her coffee mugs joined his in the kitchen. The apartment became theirs instead of his. Lily appointed herself interior decorator and insisted on hanging drawings everywhere. Hers and Ethan's and some collaborative pieces all three of them had created. The space was cluttered and chaotic and absolutely perfect. The book project consumed their evenings and weekends. They worked in coffee shops and libraries, at kitchen tables and on park benches. Ethan drew while Clara wrote, their creative processes intertwining until neither could quite remember who'd had which idea first. 6 months after Clara moved in, they finished the manuscript, sent it to publishers along with sample illustrations and a proposal for the exhibition. 3 publishers wanted it. They chose the small independent press in Montreval that promised to make it beautiful instead of just profitable. The one that understood what they were trying to create, not just a history book, but a love letter to cities and the people who built them. The exhibition was scheduled for the following fall at the city's Historical Society, a year away. Plenty of time to perfect the final pieces, to create something worthy of what they'd set out to do. Plenty of time to keep building their life together. One evening in late spring, almost a year after the coffee collision that started everything, they walked along the river while Lily ran ahead chasing birds. The city was alive with flowers and warmth, the trees heavy with new leaves. I've been thinking about something, Clara said quietly. Dangerous, Ethan teased. She elbowed him gently. I'm serious. I've been thinking about the future. About what comes after the book is published. What comes after is we make another one, and another. We keep telling stories. I want that, but I also want... She stopped walking, turned to face him. I want to make this official. Us. This family we've built. Ethan's heart started racing. Official how? However you want. Marriage, if that matters to you. Or just commitment. A promise that we're in this for the long term. Claire's voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly. I love you. I love Lily. I want to build a life with you both that goes beyond right now. Are you proposing to me? I think I am. Is that weird? Should I have waited for you to do it? Nothing about us has been conventional so far. Ethan pulled her closer, his hands on her waist. And yes, whatever you're asking, yes. You don't want to think about it? I've been thinking about it for months. I was just trying to figure out the right time to ask you. Clara laughed, joy and relief mixing in her expression. So we're both disasters who wanted the same thing but were too scared to say it? Sounds about right. Lily's gonna lose her mind when we tell her. Absolutely lose it, Ethan agreed. They kissed there by the river while the city moved around them, and Lily called out that she'd found an interesting rock. And Ethan thought about how far he'd come from the exhausted, lonely man who'd arrived in Montreval a year ago. That version of himself had been surviving, keeping his head down, proving he could do it alone. This version was living, building something meaningful with people he loved, creating art that mattered and a family that felt like home, all because of spilled coffee and a woman who'd chosen to laugh instead of getting angry. The exhibition opened on a perfect October evening with golden light and crisp air. The Historical Society's gallery was packed with people: students, faculty, community members, families. Ethan's original showcase drawings were displayed alongside new pieces created specifically for the book. Clara's text panels explained the history while the illustrations made it visceral and immediate. Lily wore her purple dress and appointed herself official tour guide, explaining to anyone who'd listen about the research process and how she'd help choose which stories to tell. This one is about the immigrant families who built the Riverside Market, she told a bemused couple. And this one shows what Montreval looked like before there were cars. And this one is my favorite because my daddy drew it and Clara wrote the story, and I helped them figure out the important parts. Ethan and Clara watched from across the gallery, holding hands, overwhelmed by how many people had come. We did it, Clara whispered. We really did. The book comes out next month. The reviews are already good. This could actually be the start of something. It already is the start of something. Ethan pulled her closer. This whole year has been starts. New project, new family, new life. No regrets? Not a single one. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, and they stood there watching people engage with their work, watching strangers connect with the stories they'd spent a year researching and illustrating, watching their collaboration become something bigger than either of them could have created alone. Later that night, after the exhibition closed and they'd walked home through the quiet streets, they found Lily already asleep on the couch, still in her purple dress, clutching a program from the opening. Ethan carried her to bed while Clara changed into comfortable clothes. They met back in the living room, exhausted and content, collapsing onto the couch together. I have something for you, Ethan said, pulling a small wrapped package from his pocket. Clara's eyes widened. Is this... Open it. She unwrapped it carefully to reveal a simple ring, silver band with tiny engraved details. City buildings forming a skyline all the way around. Ethan, she breathed, I know we already agreed to get married, but I wanted to do this properly. Ask you officially. He took the ring and knelt in front of her, his heart pounding. Clara Whitmore, will you marry me? Yes, she said immediately, tears streaming down her face. Yes, yes, yes. He slipped the ring on her finger and she pulled him up into a kiss that tasted like salt and joy and everything they'd built together. When? She asked when they finally broke apart. Whenever you want. Tomorrow, next year. Doesn't matter as long as it happens. Small ceremony, just us and Lily and the people we love? Perfect. They got married 3 months later on a cold January morning at City Hall. Lily was the flower girl and ring bearer and official photographer. Ethan's mother flew in from Philadelphia. Clara's parents drove up from Boston, A handful of close friends filled the small room. It was simple and quick and exactly what they wanted. Afterward, they went to Rosie's cafe for celebratory hot chocolate and pastries. Lily gave a speech about how she'd known all along they should get married because they had the smiley look. Everyone laughed and took pictures and made toasts. And Ethan sat there with his wife, and his daughter, and thought about how impossibly far he'd come. How a year and a half ago he'd been drowning in loneliness and exhaustion. How one chaotic morning and spilled coffee had changed absolutely everything. That night, after Lily was asleep and they'd changed out of their wedding clothes, Ethan and Clara stood at the window looking out at Montreval's winter skyline. Snow was starting to fall, transforming the city into something magical. "Do you remember what you asked me?" Clara said quietly. "The first day we really talked. At the bookstore." "What?" "You asked what I drew when no one was paying me, except you were asking about yourself. What you drew just for you." "I remember." "You started drawing again after that. The pieces for the showcase, the book illustrations. All of it came from that question. You gave me permission to create again, to want more than just survival." Clara turned to face him, her expression soft in the city lights. "You gave me permission to live again, to want more than just achievement. So we saved each other?" "I think we did." They stood there holding each other while snow fell outside and their daughter slept safely down the hall, and their life stretched out before them full of possibility. 2 years after that wedding, their second book was published. Then a third. The series grew into something significant, histories of cities told through art and narrative. They traveled to research, bringing Lily along during school breaks. Built a career from collaboration and shared passion. Lily grew older, started talking about being a history artist for real. Drew constantly, asked endless questions, inherited both their creative spirits and her own unique perspective. The apartment stayed small but felt enormous because it was filled with love and laughter and the beautiful chaos of lives well lived. Ethan never stopped drawing Clara. New portraits accumulated over the years, Clara reading to Lily, Clara absorbed in research, Clara laughing at something ridiculous. A visual record of their life together. And Clara never stopped finding new stories to tell, new ways to make history come alive. Never stopped being amazed that this man and this child had chosen to love her, had made space for her in their life. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they took Lily back to the original bookstore, the wandering page where it had all really started. Climbed into the giant reading chair together, the 3 of them, and read stories until the owner gently suggested they might want to actually buy something. They each chose a book. Lily picked one about female scientists. Clara chose a collection of historical essays, and Ethan selected a children's book about taking chances. Walking home afterward, Lily between them holding both their hands, Ethan felt the familiar contentment settle over him. This life they'd built, this family they'd created, this love that had started with coffee and chaos, and 2 lonely people brave enough to open their doors. "What are you thinking about?" Clara asked, reading his expression the way she'd learned to do. "Just that I'm happy. Really, completely happy." "Me too." "Me 3, Lily added. "Can we get pizza for dinner?" "Absolutely," Clara said. "With extra cheese? Is there any other way?" They walked through Montreval's evening streets, their city now, full of memories and meaning, past the cafe where they'd had their first real conversation, past the university where Ethan had exposed his heart through drawings, past the river where Clara had asked him to build a future together, past all the places that had witnessed their transformation from isolated individuals into something bigger and better, into family. And somewhere in those streets, another lonely person was having their own coffee collision, their own unexpected moment that would change everything. Another story was beginning the way good stories often do, with accidents and spilled beverages and people willing to laugh instead of getting angry. But that was their story to discover. This one, Ethan and Clara and Lily's story, was already written, already lived, already perfect in its imperfect, chaotic, beautiful way. Sometimes the most important chapters don't begin with grand plans or perfect timing. Sometimes they begin with spilled coffee and quiet hallways, and single parents brave enough to open their doors. With professors who remember that life is meant to be lived. With 6-year-olds who understand love better than adults ever will. Sometimes they begin with two people who are drowning separately learning to swim together. And sometimes that's exactly how they're supposed to begin,